Okay. Okay. Now we're on the third stream. And hopefully, well, I don't want to say last, but hopefully the last one tonight. Maybe I should have tested this before. Nah, I got it. Uh, and boy, it is going quite well. Ready to end school. Well, I was ready a long time ago, but my school is ready to end very soon. But you might. I should. This is the computer camera. So I'm just gonna. So here I am in my studio. All the famous stuff you love, like the books, the map, the exposed wall, just right up there. And the guns I always have to move out of shot. That I actually do use those to make sure I have everything in the desk that I need. Though, interesting fact right now, just gonna. This house is currently under renovation, so it has been a hard time. Moving on. What am I gonna do after the Civil War? Sleep, probably for the first time in a long time. This question is always weird to me because the future of this series has always been, I would say, in flux. As I was saying earlier, I was not planning on doing the full war because you would have to be insane to do that. Now I do plan on doing that because I am insane, but I don't know what the timetable is for that because I have college. And while I would love to do this series throughout college, I'm not sure if that's viable, plausible, or a smart decision in the slightest. But I do plan on finishing this series. And what am I going to do after the Civil War? Probably more American history videos. I've been working a lot on that. Probably some one-off stuff. I also plan on doing regiments and people of the Civil War, but moving on from that, there's some great St. Louis history I picked up. Like, we had a car bombing thing. But, do the 100 Years' War. Yeah, I think that's gonna do it. Why not cover the Jim Crow era? I have a very huge bluntness to me and not the greatest use of sensitivity. And, I mean, first off, I shouldn't be covering the Civil War in this case, but the Jim Crow era, I don't know how I would do that while being respectful to the people who suffered during that, to people nowadays that stores. I don't know how to do that while also being very with the facts and not getting bogged down in the emotion. So, yeah, I don't know how I would do that. But after that, maybe I have some scripts planned for the philosophy of history, different kinds of like ways of looking at history I might do. That I plan on doing that, but also I make a lot of promises that I really shouldn't. I have probably promised the world to people, and I definitely can't deliver on that. But yeah. Oh, also I'm a proud St. Louisian, so I'm drinking our famous drink, radioactive water. That is only partially a joke. We have had problems with nuclear waste before, but I'm planning on drinking Fitz's. I haven't drank a lot of alcohol, as you could probably tell by the everything about me, but I definitely have drank a lot of soda that I plan on. So there's that. I have fallen into the awkwardness of things. Will you ever cover both world wars or the 1918 flu pandemic? Probably not. I mean, those are already being covered. I've kind of stolen Indy's thing. Hopefully, he never gets to the Civil War and realizes it. Nah. But I don't think I could do that. I'm currently not in a college. I'm in high school. Chernobyl and Fukushima disasters. I actually Soviet history. I have done a little bit of, especially early Soviet history, but Chernobyl and Fukushima. I feel like I would need a greater knowledge of the science behind it than I do. I'm not a STEM guy at all. Well, maybe a little bit of math, but that's more of just a lot of being forced to by my parents. But I don't think I would cover them because, I mean, I'm not very. Assuming I'm in college, I'm very happy about that. I look older than I am, and I sound like a college student, which I assume is referring to me being more knowledgeable and not me, being high as the stereotype among college students is. But the stuff I would cover, Civil War week by week. Yeah, I probably wouldn't do another week by week series unless some major things happened. American history, maybe some earlier stuff. And by earlier stuff, I'm referring to like the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, 1850s. Yeah, a lot of the Fukushima stuff I've learned about is a lot of the stuff where it's a lot of the stuff where it's like, why did Japan think of doing this? There was a lot of anger at the fact they built it on the coast. No, I would share in that anger from what I know. But you actually have to give me a second because I apparently forgot to plug in my computer. Yeah, so, yeah. Yeah, I've definitely seen upticks in stuff when I cover the major battles and such, but the thing is, I, I don't have the expertise or skills to talk about things that have been greatly covered. If you've noticed, when I talk about stuff like Bull Run or Wilson's Creek or Shiloh, I get lost. That's also because I don't do maps because I'm a terrible drawer. So I cover more smaller stuff where I'm more comfortable, where I feel like I'm doing it more. I'm probably going to move on to things. Yes, I am. I'm probably wider than everything. I have never seen the sunlight ever. The American Revolution, I wouldn't cover it week by week because that's very long, and also it had a lot of downtime. Civil War has less downtime. There's only been one episode where I remember I literally said nothing happened this week, and I should have taken that time to talk about other things. But with the Revolutionary War, there's going to be a lot of time where I'm just like nothing happened this week. So I might cover that. I might cover the Continental Congress and all of the arguments it had. But, War of 1812, I would cover it. I would cover that, but again, not week by week, because with all these older wars, you're going to come into stuff where there's a lot of downtime, a lot of movement, a lot of rallying of men, then a lot of weeks. Why not make 1 hour video about American history like Fire of Learning? I'd say American history is longer than 1 hour, but also I want to get in the nitty gritty. Yeah. Good martial. Yeah, a lot of. I wonder what those exceptions are. I mean, I guess a lot of the. Hmm. 17th century's wars. You'll notice that when I talk about historical stuff, month by month, maybe. I mean, that would still. I think that would still take some time. Let's see, approximately 7 years. So that'd be a total of four. That'd be a total of 14. No, so well, not 14. I think 84 videos about the American Revolutionary War. Yeah, maybe. I don't want to promise something I can't keep, but maybe. I was thinking. Actually, I was talking with someone else, and we were talking about the 6-Day War hour by hour, which is a very interesting idea. It would be a bit hard on my part since I am not in Egypt or Israel currently, and I probably won't be there anytime soon. But I would, if I were to return to the blank by blank format, it would probably be smaller, I would think. Which one do I prefer? I'm trying to keep up with the chat while also making sure everything is going on okay with the camera. Oh, iPhone. Yeah, would I controversial wars? Maybe. I do not want to offend people. It has never been my goal to offend people, but also I'm not one to stray away from the heat of controversy. Vietnam, War on Terror. War on Terror would be weird. I was born during the War on Terror. War on Terror. It's just a very vague term, and I don't know how I would cover that without showing too much of personal bias, and also doing that in a way that can be done with a mixing of politics and warfare and all of the combined. Yeah, the Civil War in itself is a pretty controversial conflict. It is divisive even nowadays. But I could do a controversial war. I would be more than willing to do the 6-Day War, which is filled with controversy. I've actually written scripts for some more modern day conflicts which were taking a lot with politics. I did one on the recent Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict of 2020, going over their use of drones, but there's not a lot of good research on that topic, so it was a lot of just like, here's what the BBC says. So there was a lot of... I have learned more and more how little I know when I'm doing this. I had an entire Illinois Mormon War, a successor to my Missouri Mormon War, ready to do. And then I looked at it, I looked at the script, and I said, wait a minute, I'm missing a year here. I'm missing not just a year, I'm missing the year, the time where the war went on. I start with Joseph Smith's death is blank. Sorry for the spoilers. Joseph Smith died at some point. And then I skipped to the Mormons left Illinois. Western medieval history is the best. I can't say one way or the other. It's not my thing. I don't. I mean, history kind of just grabs you what grabs you. But Western medieval history, that's perfect. I wouldn't say I'm not a history snob to other people out loud. In my mind, I definitely have many thoughts. Not a fan of art history because I don't get it. Yeah. Do I have an echo? Ugh. The American West month by month. Huh. I don't. I think that might be a little long. I mean, the American West is fascinating, but um, yeah. Yep. Is it Echo? Um, yeah, I'm not doing very good with this. So, the American West, fascinating topic, especially with the na- Native American wars. Not very covered, besides some of the more major stuff like the about Little Bighorn. But there's definitely a lot of stuff in there. But I would have to, if I pick another subject to do blank by blank, probably going to do it. When I jumped into the American Civil War, I had known things. I mean, the American Civil War, that's big, but it wasn't my area of expertise per se. I just thought, like, man, wouldn't it be cool? And then I jumped into it. So I would probably have that initial gut reaction if I was going to do something again, blank by blank. Philippines Insurrection War. I think I would be lost when it comes to that one. I think that I would be like the equivalent. I would have to rely a lot on just a few books since I don't know where to go. So that one, I'm not entirely sure if I could do that. Mexican-American War. Now this one is interesting because I know quite a bit about the Mexican-American War politics-wise. I know a lot about, here's what individual senators, as representatives, especially what was doing before and after with the entire Whig Democrat split. But I don't know a lot about the battles. But as I researched the generals of the American Civil War, I learned out more and more about the Mexican-American War. So maybe is what I'm gonna answer your question the same one. Mexican-American War, maybe? I don't know. American colonial history? I am having a wonderful day. American colonial history. Now, I'm probably gonna cover it individually. I'm not gonna set out to go over like, oh, I want to cover all of the American colonial history. But what I will probably do is like talk about St. Louis colonial history. I'll talk about here's how it was founded, and here is pretty much all of the problems of St. Louis. St. Louis history. I love my city. I drink its soda. But we don't have the perfect past. We have a lot of good stuff. We invented kindergarten for the United States. Actually, St. Louis was a huge pusher for early education advancement. We were a lot of the first integrated school of the West, first integrated middle school of the West, and we brought the idea of kindergarten from Germany to America. So that is a 7 Years' War. That is Field Marshal territory. He knows a lot more about it than I do. I would send you over to his channel. In fact, even if you don't want to learn about the 7 Years' War, I would send it over to him. He is very good at that. That's a lot more his stuff. Would you cover the Industrial Revolution era? I mean, that is pretty vague. I might cover some of the colonial conflict. I have actually a Martini Henry rifle over there because I really liked learning about the Anglo-Zulu War, Battle of East Andawana, Rorke's Drift, the Endpoint especially. Besides from those two battles, it isn't talked about much. And I think that's a shame because I really got into it. There was a lot of stuff. I actually learned a little bit of Zulu. And by learning a little bit of Zulu, I mean, I learned zero Zulu at all, but I knew how to write them on paper. But yeah, so I might cover the Anglo-Zulu War, but the entire Industrial Revolution era, now that is way beyond me. But I also just want to point out, actually, maybe I should do another frequently asked question here. Do I plan on doing this professionally? The answer to that is, it is not my plan. I love doing this. I will probably do this recreationally, like it's some sort of drug. After college, I'll probably. Is this a Q and N? I mean, yeah. I assume Mr. Sandoval, Q&A. Yes, this is a Q&A, and whatever you guys pretty much want to talk about, because my computer is being very slow and won't let me watch my Lego videos in peace. But no, would I cover Prohibition? I don't know what... I would cover city Prohibition. I would cover St. Louis Prohibition. Because Prohibition is a pretty... When I cover things, I guess it would fall into two groups. It would be the grounded, like, let me talk about the Missouri Mormon War, clear structure. Excuse me. Even more vague stuff is Civil War, week by week. I mean, sure, we have the, time limit of Fort Sumter to Appomattox, and I'm probably going to end the series at Appomattox instead of going over some of the further, the ways down south battle there, or the ship that evaded for a year. So I'm probably going to stop there. But it's also going to... It's kind of worldly. I cover things that maybe you shouldn't talk about, like the formation of a Dutch government, or I'm going to talk about Cinco de Mayo in passing, not talk about a lot. So it's a lot less grounded, but just Prohibition, that is where do I would probably... I will talk about St. Louis Prohibition. I can make you that promise. What decade? I can't promise that. What's my favorite color? Red. I guess. Red. I don't really have a favorite color, but I've learned that saying I don't have a favorite color will just lead to more questions. So I just say red. There's a lot of channels already doing European history. For American history, I wouldn't say my channel is bound for success, but American history is very nice, and I also wouldn't say it's a niche, since America is pretty big, but I do like the niche, as it were. What about St. Louis? Okay, for those of you who don't live near St. Louis, or also people who live in St. Louis but don't care about a lot of local history, there's an ongoing debate about the name of our city. And I will not get too much into it because I do not want to go over it, but St. Louis was a saint in the Catholic Church. He was very kind to Catholics. He was very pious, and he was very charitable towards Catholics. He kicked the Jews out of France, and he did a crusade in, I think, Egypt. I think he tried and failed in Egypt, and then he was ransomed back. And St. Louis was founded by Catholics. We were founded by French Catholics, fur traders, and they named it after St. Louis. And then St. Louis became a major immigrant city. We were an immigrant city towards Irish Catholics, German Catholics, Jews. What are the big ones? We also had a huge African American population. We've had a Russian population, quite a bit of Bosnian immigrants, and all of the like. And as we got further and further away from the French Catholics, we started to like them less and less. I don't want to get very angry at those dang Romanists taking over America back to the 1856 anti-Catholic craze, but they were a huge power base, and they did some not nice things, and that brought up more and more anger against Catholic ideas. Well, specifically French Catholic. We still have a huge German and Irish Catholic. So there's actually an ongoing debate about should we change the name of the city to Scottsville or Dreadville, after Dred Scott, who comes from, well, I won't say, he was born in Virginia, moved all around, but the famous court case started in St. Louis, and he was a huge person in the build up to the Civil War. And actually, I know most of us know the story ends as with he lost the court case, and the Supreme Court said some terrible things, but he actually later bought his freedom around here. And so they were thinking about changing the name to honor him. I'm not going to get into my personal beliefs, but that's actually the ongoing debate within the city of St. Louis. I don't know exactly which way it's going to fall. St. Louis has done some stuff like this. There used to be a statue of, I don't remember who that we removed, but yeah, if you told me I had to put money down on it, I would probably say we're not going to change the name, but I don't know. Pepe Baguette. There are certainly some people who want it to, but I don't see that getting a lot of traction. But I mean, there's also a weird thing I do, where, especially with St. Louis history, I kind of mix it with all the different time periods, and it really doesn't help me when it comes to understanding my city at all. But there, St. Louis has a big historical contribution to Dred Scott. I would say we do. But also, because of that, I think if we were to change the name, if someone said change the name, I would probably put it on him. I think he's probably our biggest contribution. I mean, maybe I don't remember who invented kindergarten in the United States, but I think Scott had a bigger part in America. But I guess there's also the kind of thing where there's always why change the name, and then yeah, I agree with you, Adrian. I don't think they're going to change the name, but that's just some minor conflict in St. Louis. Luckily, it's St. Louis, so this is our only conflict we have. At the time, we don't have any other things to talk about, but we actually have a new mayor who's moving forward, Tashara Jones, who beat out Cara Spencer. I won't go into that, but St. Louis has its work cut out for us. We're a dying city. By that I mean population is going down instead of up. We have a lower population than we did in the 1800s, but we still have a population, and that's what counts. Now, yeah. Moving on, actually maybe I should move on from, how was my day? I'm good. I just got done with quite a bit of homework, and I think I did well. Whole well-known city. You say well-known city, but I'm not entirely sure it's actually that well-known. When I moved from St. Louis to Chicago, they thought I was from England. I spoke like this, and they're like, where is St. Louis? And they thought it was England. I mean, we have the Cardinals, so you, come on guys, but, well known? Yeah, I would, is St. Louis well known? This dude needs a new background. What do you guys think of my background? I mean, be as hard as you want. I know I have a lot of empty space. Actually, maybe I should show. All right. So here's my actual bookshelf. These are all on. These are all of my. These are actually a lot of the books I use. Like this book from Osprey I used on. Oh yeah. Oh, on YouTube. Yeah. The bookshelf is kind of empty. The map is actually placed because there's nothing under it. There is. Over here I have a little bit of cutlery that we actually saw in the ASMR with the exact same kind. Maybe should I do a little ASMR right now? I am 6 feet. Yeah, so I have, these are all reproduction, so moving on, here, I think I actually might have wasted this, because this is supposed to be an ammunition box. Where did I get the map? Online. I just looked up. Someone said you should have a map you can point to, so I digged around. First I was planning on actually getting a shower, I'm blanking on the word right now, for, shower curtain. But instead I got this, labeled as tapestry. Yeah, I change the background. YouTube. I have a canteen here that I've never filled with water. And then I have a 1941 dictionary, which I got I got after my grandfather died, and it has the 1940s had a way with language that it didn't age well, as it were. I had a lot of fun looking at it, and I had a lot of fun reading it, and I would never read it publicly because that stuff, even like stuff not related to religion, race, or gender, they found a way to make it wrong. But yeah. Just we're gonna move around here. So this light. Okay, that is supposed to turn on. I don't know why it isn't right now. I have my root beer right here, which hopefully should not be normally on the set. I have my 2 ink stuff. This one is actually real ink that you can use to write. In this impressive collection, I hope you're referring to the books because all this stuff, I mean, I like, but I wouldn't exactly say impressive. I've seen a lot of. I don't want to be. I don't want to sound like overly humble, where I'm trying to, excuse my extravagance, but I like the stuff I have. So this is empty. I just use it for set design. I have this old fake journal. I remember there was a scene I did where I was writing in this, pretending to be Sickles' daughter. I don't remember which page I did that on, but I actually wrote some stuff down in here. I think it was just like random letters that I did for that scene. I have my other journal, which I don't think I've written in yet, but who knows. Just moving on. Would you ever do on-location Civil War history? The answer to that is 1, yes, and 2, I already done with Wilson's Creek. I hope to, during the summer, actually venture out in other parts of Missouri. I might do some on-location about battles I've already covered, and by battles I mean skirmishes, because Civil War in Missouri was Wilson's Creek, New Madrid, where there's nothing that remains, Belmont, which I'm actually going to be going to soon, and then the rest of it is just like skirmishes, not scrimmages. So yeah, I would definitely do on location Civil War history. On location is great, but actually that does require me going to the sun, and I think I burn up in the sun. Yeah. Over here, just yeah, there's all the stuff. The candlestick holder, which I've been using. Then of course I have the hat on all of the books and such. How do I do my research? Well, I have a lot of these books. So Jesse James was from Missouri, and he hit around in caves I've actually been to. So I actually might cover him. How do I do my research? I have a lot of these books that I've read through through a season. So I'm currently going back and reading up till summer, which ends in September, and then I keep notes of that in a giant Google Doc. And then from there I break it down week by week. And I also use Wikipedia to tell me what to look into on this day, AmericanCivilWar.com, all of those stuff for what do I need to cover within this week. From there I go back into more smaller books like Corinth 1862, Congress at War, Shiloh, and there I write that stuff down. Do I ever get bored of doing YouTube? No. There has never been a day where I walked into my studio and I'm like, do I have a favorite Civil War book? I don't think I do. By History Man. There's a lot of books I like. Team of Rivals, really good book about all about Lincoln. Grant by Ron Chernow, long but very good. Then there's just then there's a lot of the battle stuff. If I were to recommend a single Civil War book, it would be Battle Cry of Freedom by James McPherson, which it doesn't go in depth about everything. It doesn't even go in depth about a lot of things. But when it does, James McPherson has a great way of putting things. I've quoted him before when it was like President Jefferson Davis replied to their Jeffersonian idealism with his Federalist pragmatism, and I really liked that. He definitely knows what he's doing. He definitely knows his stuff, and he definitely knows how to describe it. But yeah, that would be the one book I would recommend. What's my favorite state? I know I should say Missouri. And yeah, if I was to move away from all the statistics and numbers and just down into, I got Missouri number one. Doesn't matter that we are last in coronavirus vaccinations. Actually, are we still? I think we're still last in coronavirus vaccinations. But we're to ignore all of the numbers, reality, economy, how it treats its citizens. I would say Missouri number one. We got this, yeah. What do I think of the Spanish-American War? Well, the Spanish-American War was a planned war where we lied so we could get territory against another colonial power that used lies to take over its territory. I would definitely side with America in that war, since I am not a fan of Spanish colonialism. Not that I'm a huge fan of America coming over and taking over the Philippines, for example. But yeah, what do I think about it? I think it was a great showing for America and a great showing for the future of war, especially against Spanish Empire, which was dying at this time. I think it was very important. I would say if the Mexican-American War was showing those who were coming in from Napoleonic ways of doing things how we would be doing things in the Victorian era, the Spanish-American War was how we were showing those in the early 20th century, World War I, we're going to show all those stuck in the Victorian era how we're going to do things in World War One. I think it's a transition war of sorts, a way of us going from the age of empire is coming to a close, the age where you can just hold on and nothing. We are going to fund independence groups. We're going to do all of this. We're going to use modern weapons. We're going to destroy your navy, and we're going to then use our improved weaponry to take over. My least favorite state? I mean, I like every single state, but my least favorite state is South Carolina. Yeah, I'm not going to elaborate further why. I would piss off a lot of people if I did that, but South Carolina, if I had to pick a least favorite state, it would be that. It's still a great state, but it is my least favorite. Would you cover important figures in the Civil War, like biographical type overviews? Yes. I plan on doing so. I plan on doing a biographical episode of Nathaniel Lyon, who died in Wilson's Creek, who fought primarily in Missouri. I plan on doing stuff about not just generals, but also politicians. Senator Benjamin Wade of Ohio, Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War, and of course Daniel Sickles, who I will be devoting probably 24-hour episode to, covering his entire life, because dang it, that man, every time where I get to the Sickles part, right before I say, and that was the week, I kind of smile a bit, because I know no matter what's going to happen, he's going to get out of it, kind of. He's going to find a way to win the battle, which he shouldn't have. He's going to find a way to win over someone he shouldn't have. He's going to find a way to do the correct maneuvering. And, I mean, Confederate politicians would be cool to focus on. Yeah, the Confederate politicians rested in the cabinet. The Confederate Congress never had its big players. And which is weird to me, because 19th century, presidents were great for defining eras. You had the Jacksonian era, who reshaped politics. But if you really want to talk about who controlled the country, it would be leaders of the Senate, leaders of the House. Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, Calhoun he also did a lot of stuff through cabinet work, but he was pretty influential in controlling a lot of the stuff. But when it came to when the Confederates formed their breakaway government, they gave a lot of power to the president, because it's wartime and you want a single leader. You want a decisive leader. And his cabinet, if Lincoln was a team of rivals where he was able to get things to work together, Chase hated Stanton. Chase hated Seward. Seward hated Cameron. And he was able to find a way to get them to all work together and all do their jobs well. Then Jefferson Davis was the equivalency of just saying, do you want a job? Do you want a job? Do you want a job? He had two good cabinet members. He had the Secretary of the Navy, whose name is eluding me, and he had Judah P. Benjamin. And Judah P. Benjamin probably held the Confederacy together longer than it could have been by a normal person. So I would probably cover Judah P. Benjamin. The Secretary of the Navy has lived a boring life. Jefferson Davis and Stevens. There's also just not a lot to say, because a lot of them were just going around poorly running their departments, and that's just, you can only say, and then they missed the quota so many times. Which period or aspect of the war would you run as a roleplay game? Battles, prickle, wrangling at any level, skirmishes, etc. I've always been a sucker for the political aspects. I've always been more drawn to the political aspect. So I might do a makeshift Senate. I I think that would be more fun because, I mean, running around with guns and going pew pew, which I think is, which I mean, I love Nerf. I've done that at many birthday parties, but a makeshift Senate, I think that could be really cool. Was Jefferson Davis a kind of Confederate pseudo-dictator? Dictator is a loaded term. It implies a lot of things. You seized power in a coup. You're holding on to it. Jefferson Davis was given a lot of power. Sometimes he overstepped his bounds, but unlike Lincoln, when he did things that was found to be unconstitutional, the Supreme Court had the power to, wrangle him in. Jefferson Davis didn't have that, but I wouldn't. So he did have dictatorial-like powers. He was given a lot of power, but he didn't seize a lot of power. He broke away, and he was given interim control where he did a lot of stuff, but and then he overstepped his bounds with telling a few generals what to do, trying to get his diplomats, but he had a dictatorial level power given to him by a bunch of people who were not fully elected, but yeah. That'd be a Matrix type game where everyone having rules on the outside but hidden personal goals. I mean, that's politics for you. You're not going to get a lot of politicians who go out there and say exactly what they believe. In fact, just reading through a lot of the politicians' speeches, even when they're in private and only are remembered in diaries, those people lied through their teeth constantly. Lincoln, Davis, Stanton, Benjamin, all these people were just lying constantly. Cameron, especially, who is gone from the main scene. When I was trying to describe how corrupt he was, I could have gone into how he threatened the owner of the B&O Railroad, I will arrest you. Yeah, the Secretary of War can't do that. The way he was talking about was what Lincoln would do, where he would detain someone on the idea of, you have Southern sympathy, so we're going to detain you on being a traitor. But Secretary of War just can't do that. Follow-up question: what aspect of the war is pretty less well known to most people, but you think is super cool? When we're talking about the congressional aspects of the war, we're going to talk about the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, which was some of the a lot of those amendments were after the war, but we have already moved on to the Legal Tender Act. I've already talked about the Confiscation Act, but a lot of the funding and how they were going around with the war and just the constant Lincoln had a very good Congress on his hands. And by that I mean the Congress, all of the people who opposed him, well, most of the people who opposed him left. They left when their state seceded. So we had a very good Senate who would pass quite a bit of his stuff. But also, each of these senators was constantly worried about how they would look. They were worried that because a lot of the southern states left who would oppose them, they would look like they're dictators, like they're overstepping their bounds. So we had to constantly fight to argue saying, this is constitutional, and also, this is what you're supposed to do. Just do your job, please, because they were very worried about how they would be perceived. Why was Davis chosen as CSA president? I would say because he was chosen because they wanted someone they could rally around. All these people were coming from a political aspect of life. They were all coming from state government or federal government, and they all disagreed. And Davis was the one person they found least disagreeable with. They were like, yeah, we can trust you. And it's because of this, the Confederacy was very worried about showing division. They would not allow political parties to exist. many newspapers were like, oh, this is a person is a Southern Whig, this person is a Southern Democrat before, and then they would later identify them as pro-administration or anti-administration. But throughout the entire time, no Confederate official was a member of a political party. When President Jefferson Davis ran for his 6-year term, he ran unopposed. So when they were trying to figure out who to pick for what, they just went with what is someone we can all agree with and none of us will get angry at. And they picked Jefferson Davis. And then for the rest of the war, he would have to constantly try to keep that agreeable nature of him. I mean, feels like an overhyped sideshow. What will you say to persuade indifferent Europeans that the American Civil War is worth the look? The American Civil War, more than any other conflict in American history, has defined the modern day of America. Now, when I say that, there's a bunch of qualifiers I want to put on there. One, what we have done with it since has definitely changed. The actions of future generations, or even the current generation in 10 years, definitely has fixed how America is. Also, without the American Revolution, there might not be an independent America. But if you wanted to understand the divisions within America, within a lot of the anger, a lot with how we look at each other, how we look at the state, how we look at a lot of this, we come at it from, like, we look at a lot of our modern day stuff and it's just remnants of the past. And of course, everything we have today comes from the past. But I would say the American Civil War is why we have the federal government we do today. It's the reason why we have all the political divisions we have today. It's the reason why we have actual taxes. Before Lincoln, before the Civil War, no one wanted taxes, not even Lincoln, because that was insane. So they did tariffs. But in order to fund the war, they had to do taxes. So without the American Civil War, we might never have had taxation. But if you wanted to know about modern day America, look to the American Civil War. I mean, I think that's the best I could do for a European, but also, I'm just not good at getting people interested into history. I can talk with people who already care, but trying to get someone who's like, why would I want to learn about a bunch of old dead dudes, me just saying it matters today doesn't kind of mean a lot. I mean, if you want to get someone interested in history, just show them, like, Saving Private Ryan, Battle Scene. I mean, those are awesome. That's probably actually how a lot of people got interested in history. They just looked at movies. Well-known figure in the Civil War do you think needs more attention? Salmon P. Chase, the financier of the Union side of the war. Chase Bank is named after him. He had no part in founding it. They just really liked his system. Our system of taxes, how it's distributed among the states, a lot of our infrastructure, you can move down to him. The standardization of universal currency, that's him. The movement of a lot of the payment for governmental operation from the state to the federal, you can move to him. And he just doesn't get talked about a lot. So I think maybe, again, it's a lot more on the political side, but if there's someone that you should probably know more about that you don't already do, then I would say Chase. How did the Confederate Congress work and how were elections managed? How did the Confederate Congress work? It didn't. It was very similar to how the United States Congress worked, but it was even more built on state legislatures from what I know. Senators were elected via state legislators. And it was a lot of, there was a lot more, they, again, really hated disunity. They thought if there's one thing that's going to bring the Confederate down, it's disunity. In the end, they were very disunited and also destroyed for other reasons. But a lot of state legislatures, they would go around and they would try to pick unanimously for the senators. That a lot of it was also just a lot of who do you want when it came to House of Representatives. there was both state government dictated a lot to the people, and the people dictated around to the state government in a kind of roundabout way where you would vote for your state people, state legislature, state House of Representatives, state senators, and then they would tell you, like, here's who you should vote for in the upcoming election. And then the people just did it. There's a lot more roundabout in the idea of we're going to keep on asking the people who are in political land, if like a political tier list of like your civilians, state house, state senate, House of Representatives, senator. The idea was you would each ask people, cutting out like the people who don't know stuff until you got to the people who were just like politicians and professional politicians. So I got interested because my great grandfather was a soldier in World War One. Awesome. Do you know where he served? In World War One. I had family who served in World War One for Germany, and also Russia. So there was that. It could be a fun game or lecture to draw lines from American Civil War to now and follow the trail of decisions, cause and effect. Yeah, I mean, I might do that for some St. Louis with how we attacked immigrants early on, but there's just also a lot of stuff because I would have to do it more locally and state based than just nationally, because then I would just be doing like 3/4 of APUSH. Who was the last Civil War vet who was in the Army? I don't remember. I'm going to Google it. Albert Wilson. He served as a drummer boy, and I know he died in Eisenhower stuff. Well, I mean, a very interesting thing is there was a lot of Civil War veterans who were very old, and then they married young women. So Civil War widows lasted a very long time. It was a very weird thing for me to read about, like connections to the like I was trying to find like stuff in my like newspapers when it was talking about the Civil War, so I used Searchlight. And then like I got like 2008 article where it's like Civil War veteran widow dies, and I'm like, what? So the last Civil War veteran died in 1956, Albert Wilson, but like we have a lot of connections to that. For Germany, nice. Yeah. It's very weird because I had a lot of family that could have plausibly fought against each other in Europe, and then when we all moved over to United States. So I actually just am wondering, has there ever been like, there's got to be stuff where someone was from World War One, and then a German and a Russian moved to America, and they're like, hey, didn't I shoot at you? I mean, immigrant communities, there must have been a lot of mixing. 2008, I just pulled that number randomly. I have no idea when the last Civil War last Civil War widow was. I'll see what that was. 2021, January 10th? Okay. I guess it was 2021. What are some of the least pleasant aspects of the American Civil War that most Americans aren't aware of? Disease. That was not fun. I mean, it still isn't today. I don't think I've met a single person who's a big fan of disease, but disease was a huge thing that hurt people. Also, this is even nowadays, but especially back then, civilians were not treated the best by armies, so being a civilian was not fun. Then being a soldier was also not fun. There was constant fear. We talk a lot about the battles, like Gettysburg and Antietam, but there was a lot of fear, from what I've read of soldiers' diaries, of just being on the march and then a stray skirmisher shoots. So there was a constant fear of that. Then there was also the heat of moving around, just wearing the wool clothing. And then, I mean, that's just very annoying. And but whenever they moved, whenever they were in camp, there was a constant fear of just, will a skirmish bullet hit me? Will a sharpshooter from over there see my head and take a shot? Nuclear war is one of the more glorious or heartening parts of the war most Americans don't know about. Well, a lot of Americans know now about from the movie Glory. That was very nice. And then from the movie Lincoln, we have a lot of the great speeches. Then a lot of glorious aspects. That there was a lot of charges. The 2nd Minnesota at Gettysburg on the second day was very glorious. A lot of the charges we had get a lot of glory. But U.S. colored troops holding the line at Uluste, I guess, would be. Any funny stories from the war? I had an entire battle stop just to watch two guys fist fight. There's the famous quote, "They couldn't hit a barn side from over here," instantly proceeds to die. "Come on, you cowards, we're going to live forever," proceeds to die. There's a lot of very humorous last lines, I guess. There were snowball fights. There was also just people talking. There were just a lot of insults directed towards political leaders and generals. "I told you he wouldn't steal a hot stove. I must take that back. He would definitely steal a hot stove," towards Simon Cameron. That was very funny. I remember there was a person who was like, for a man of your stature, you do talk big." That was kind of funny just to read. There were a lot of times where people would stop and do stuff, but I think the one-liners from the time period were hilarious. There was a snowball fight. I heard. There was a fencing duel. There was also maybe not as funny, but there was a friendly fire incident over an argument of rum. Yeah. Which were, I mean, I guess very funny for me to read. I don't think a lot of people would have liked to be in that position. But, the Civil War has its humor. Not as much as its sadness, but there are definitely funny aspects. There's heartwarming aspects. There's just, a lot of the people writing it back then had a very, sentimental way of writing. There was a lot of hope in it. So when they moved on to just complaining about the marches, there's definitely the shift of like a before and after picture. If you go back in time to a specific day in the war, which would it be and why? Well, I would certainly stay away from every battle. I do not wish to fall victim to a bullet. The Gettysburg Address would be amazing to hear. Every July 4th I listened to it, and hearing it from Lincoln would have been amazing. I probably wouldn't watch a lot of the battles for fear, and also I wouldn't want to see people actually die. So maybe the passing of the Emancipation Bill for the District of Columbia, hearing the Emancipation Proclamation on the day, that would have been great. When were the snowball fights, fencing duels, and the fist fight battles? I wish I could tell you off the top of my mind, but these kinds of happiness usually came during long periods of waiting. Before a night of battle, you're too hyped up on adrenaline to sleep, much less do a lot. And then there's a lot. So during a lot of these periods of waiting is when you would hear of tales of soldiers trying to do things that were funny. Yeah. I heard Jefferson Davis was guarding when his wife, then someone wrote up and saying, "Congratulations, you're our president. Is this true?" I don't know. there's a lot of stories about the Civil War, and there's I mean there's a lot of myth making involved in it. So the idea of Jefferson Davis not knowing, I don't think so. The idea of someone running up and saying congratulations, you're our president, and then him being like, oh, everyone knows, that is plausible. The idea of just someone riding up to his house and saying congratulations, you're our president, I would say that's very likely. I mean, he was a public figure and people would come to his house. And actually, there was an interesting thing. Back then, coming to people's houses and just staying for some time, very common. Lincoln had a constant problem with Congress because his wife would just keep on inviting people over, like a normal person at the time, and they would stay with the president during a war where decisions were being made. Like, they would be eating dinner and the cabinet's over there arguing about what to do with a general. And of course this caused leaks to the press. So if someone rode up to Jefferson Davis' house and was like just allowed to, that would definitely happen. But that exact story I do not know. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Another thing is when I talk about these stories, I have to when I make my videos, I have to kind of play the role of a storyteller, because just being a nerdy guy who knows a lot of facts is very uninteresting to watch. So I constantly look into these kinds of storytelling versions of the war. But, I mean, usually I have to come across it. I come across them, and then I have to come to the realization, oh, these aren't true. But I've also come across many who are like, wow, that is true? So this one I'm not 100% certain. There are a lot of public misconceptions about World War I, which scholarship is trying to challenge. What modern misconceptions are there about the American Civil War? Well, there is always the looming threat regarding the cause of the war, which recent scholarship is trying to move against the United Daughters of the Confederacy on that. There's a lot more to trying to get people to talk about, yeah, this was not as happy or as glorious a war as it's often thought of. But I think the real one is the casualty figure of the American Civil War has forever been placed at around 650,000 deaths. And in fact, it's so prevalent that James McPherson didn't even feel the need to cite it in his work. But that number comes from 2 Civil War veterans right after the war. And, I mean, their work invaluable. Their methods questionable. So there's a lot of recent scholarship trying to actually come up with a way more accurate casualty number. It's actually way higher than 650,000. So I think that's the main stuff. But of course, there's the political stuff around the Civil War that modern scholarship is trying to move around. Love your channel. It's nice to see the Civil War on such a micro level as opposed to really just large, well-known events. I agree, Miss Lily. I especially see around with the big events, it's the battles. And battles are awesome, but... No, who am I kidding? Battles are awesome. I love talking about them. I love seeing map videos about them from my good friends at Warhawk. But, yeah, the micro gets down into the nitty-gritty, the politics, the humanity. That's really what I feel like the micro level lets me do. It allow me to break down into the humanity of them. Maybe I should not have drank carbonated soda. But, yeah. Where's Robert E. Lee? What is he up to at the moment? He's in Richmond, currently, getting very angry at every other general in the field. After he was sent around First, he was in Virginia, where he failed a battle, so they sent him down south to the coasts, where he failed. Currently, he's in Richmond as an advisor to Jefferson Davis, and he's writing letters telling Johnston, Jackson, everyone, can we please start moving and fighting and winning? He's also digging in. He's currently trying to fortify Richmond, which is why he's the Queen of Spades. You mentioned your family was German. Did any of your ancestors fight in the Franco-Prussian War? Not that I know of. I know part of my family fought in World War One. I know I had family who, well, a lot of my family escaped from the Nazis since I am Jewish and they were Jewish, and they fled and fought for America during that war. But I also have German Catholic, I think German Catholic, or maybe Protestant. They converted when they married the Irish Catholic side of my family, who were in World War One and then were engineers, tank fixers for the Nazis. But Franco-Prussian War, I'm not entirely sure. Do you wargame with miniatures or video games? If so, what are you playing? I do wargame American Civil War with video games. I try to do miniatures, but as I suck at painting and can't do mapping, I also can't paint miniatures, it seems. So I rely on video games. Grand Tactician, Civil War, I really like. I've been really enjoying. It takes a lot of my computer, and if the stream has taught you guys anything, it's my computer can't take a lot, but I really like it. Ultimate General Civil War Classic. I've actually 100%ed that game. I loved it so much. Those are the two big ones, I would say. Those are the tactical, move them around. Then there's mods for Total War if you're into that, but I would recommend Grand Tactician if you want to really change things. Ultimate General Civil War if you want to recreate those famous battles you know a lot about. Yeah. Civil War video games, I don't think there's enough of them. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't think there's enough historical video games, period, but Civil War video games, there's War of Rights as the shooters, there is also Mountain Blade mods for shooters, then we have your tactical strategy games of Ultimate General, Civil War, and then Grand Tactician, and I just wish there was more. Oh, hi, Tommy. But I think the problem is there's just not a lot of money in it, and video game development is driven a lot by money. The Civil War, one, you're limiting your audience's interest. The American Civil War kind of, it doesn't have to stay within America in terms of people who are interested in it. It doesn't. I know there are people from other nations who watch my videos, but it tends to. So you're limiting your market. Then also, Americans, you can kill Nazis all you want. Killing Nazis is fun, but you know, when it comes down to the Civil War stuff, hey, you're walking into politics there. No one's gonna complain if you're not no one wants you to be a fan of the Nazis, but there's still a lot of fandom. I would say I'm definitely using a wrong term for units, for one side over the other. And if you paint one side a certain way that goes against someone's perception, you're going to get a lot of anger. So there just isn't the money for it. You talk about Jackson. What did he do in the Mexican-American War? He did very little. He met Lee during that war, but for the most part, he didn't have a time to shine. He had 2 promotions, and then he would go on to teach at, I think, Virginia Military Institute. But for his part in the Mexican-American War, he just didn't do quite a bit. He was always, he didn't do tactical. He wasn't the only leader of a lot of battles. He was always a subordinate. So, yeah. And will I talk about Jackson's other stuff? Sure. But Otto and Shay kind of beat me to a lot of it. I like watching his stuff, and Jackson, I mean, there's more to talk about than what he covered, but also he covered quite a bit. So will I talk about Jackson? Yes. Will it be towards the end? Yes. What? I'm not. And painting is optional. What's fun is you can either recreate a story, play what fun what ifs. Yeah, I've used wooden blocks for personal recreation. I've done just drawing lines in sands on a beach for doing it recreation. I've done Kriegsspiele, the old German game. So yeah, what was the most Western battle of the war? It's gotta be a small skirmish in California. There must have been some stuff. The most northwest battle of the war, Battle of Athens, Missouri, which actually involved people shooting over from Iowa into it. Yeah, I took a non-American with an interest in the American Civil War here. Yay! Yeah. How do you think the war would have gone if Britain got involved? Perhaps if America declared war on France after the war. If Britain got involved, the war would have been over. Lincoln would not be willing to risk a war on both fronts in this case. Also, we talk a lot about Britain invading, a lot of it attacking. I think if Britain was to continue its deterioration of diplomatic ties to the Union, it wouldn't take a war. I think it would have taken the equivalency of an ultimatum, a recalling of ambassador, severe a sign like, if you don't stop, we're going to go to war. I think that's what it would have taken. If America declared war on France after the war. Now, this is very interesting because, one, if America declared war on France after the war, I have a very strong feeling that Prussia would have moved in a lot quicker than it did in 1870 to take Alsace-Lorraine. And I think that would have went well. Now, if America was fighting a colonial war with France, it did. After the American Civil War, it helped Mexico to fight off the French. So, France declaring war on a war between America and France afterwards, I think would have gone well for America in the short term. I'm not sure because America is kind of, during this time, isolated economically. Canada and Mexico were not as economically developed as America, and it required a lot of trade with the United Kingdom and France. And if we attacked them, I could definitely see us seizing territory. We would have a lot more colonies in the Caribbean, maybe even some small outposts in Africa, but we would not be doing as well as we are right now. If we declared war on Britain after the American Civil War, I don't think we would have won. I don't think the UK would have ended America after the American Civil War. If we had fought a war before, I could definitely see it reclaiming its colonies. But after the war, I think it might have taken some states from us. I also think it would have just crippled America. What are my college plans? To attend. But more than that, poli-sci, history. I have a high opinion of myself, so Washington University, St. John's. I will go to college. My parents have made that very apparent. So that is my college plans. And afterwards, graduate school, maybe, I don't know, appreciate shuffling Ace, much more intense, fun and brilliant way to experience a specific aspect of history. Yes, and it's also very hard to do with someone who does not know how to play. I tried to teach a friend of mine how to play, and I won. And I won pretty quickly, and I won pretty well. Britain declares war, and the White House suddenly feels very vulnerable again. The White House feels very... Britain declares war. If Britain were to declare war in 1862, they would be marching down from Canada. Then they would meet up with the Confederates. The White House would probably it would sue for peace. If Britain wanted a state, it would get one. If it wanted Maine, sure. If it said recognize the Confederacy and here's a trade deal, the U.S. would accept it. The only thing I would not see them... The only thing I would see the Union trying to fight out would be if they said you're going to recognize the Confederacy and we're going to take all of your states or a majority of your states. That's the only thing I would see. Hey, what what did Jackson do during John Brown's raid in Harper's Ferry? Because if I remember, he was around Harper's Ferry. Um, uh, John Brown's raid. I think he was actually trying to get there. He was trying to move towards. I really shouldn't talk off book, but if I remember, Robert E. Lee I know was there, and then oh yeah, war. Yeah, they, they might have burnt down D.C., but we burnt down York, and those are the same. Yeah, no, that the burning of the Capitol was shocking. Getting near the Capitol, the Confederates got near the Capitol. That'd be shocking. Not to get too political, but the 2020 Capitol that went down, that was shocking to me. I don't know what he was doing during the raid, but after the raid, Jackson actually was guarding John Brown while he was in prison. So during that, he was doing that. I think he was trying to get towards the raid, but I don't know exactly what he was doing. Bye, Bierman. Yeah. Tommy, I don't know what he was trying to do. I think he would. I don't think he got there during the raid, but afterwards he was making sure John Brown didn't do another one. Yeah, come on, Bierman. 3 more years? That'd be ridiculous. It will be over by Thanksgiving. There's no way this could last another year. Yes, there's more work. If there is 3 more years, hopefully it isn't as intense as the last year. I severely underestimated how much was in the Civil War. I fell into you have Bull Run, you have Wilson's Creek, you have all these battles, and between them you have marching. No. If you guys have seen my videos, you would have definitely seen there's a lot going on. So, I'm actually not sure what I'm fully going to do when it comes to stuff where it's going to I guess, live me. Maybe when if I have one fear going forward, it's that I'm going to not know what to cut, because there's stuff I cut already. There's there's miniature skirmishes where between 6 guys that I don't talk about. There's some speeches I don't talk about, but I mean, there's just a lot going on. So in the future, you're going to probably hear more about the big stuff that I talk about. Lord Lincoln was offered 100. Yes, he was offered war elephants by the King of Siam. How different would the war have gone if he actually bought? He didn't have to buy them. I don't think. I think he was actually just offered. The King of Siam was very gracious in his offer, but Lincoln had a pretty good reason for not accepting them. He couldn't take care of them. Those elephants were not designed for America. So I think a lot of the time they'd just be carrying around supplies behind lines very far from the fighting. Now, if they charged the Confederates, I think if they charged the Confederates, if they somehow got them to the front line, I think they would have been effective. Taking down a war elephant is hard. I haven't tried personally yet, but charging, especially at Bull Run in the early war, I actually don't remember what date those war elephants were offered. I know it was in 1861. I don't remember when. If they were used against untrained people, they would have ran. If you charged against a bunch of Virginian recruits, it would have ran. But I don't know if they could have gotten them there. But but if he did, it would have been very effective and quite a good sight. You mentioned you were Jewish. I am. Do you know of any stories of Jewish people during the war? Judah P. Benjamin, the Jewish Confederate, I mean, he did quite a bit. There was some Jewish colonels, but also just a story I've kind of overdone. In early 1861, there was the need for a bunch of chaplains, and they were supposed to be trained in only Christianity, and this pissed off a lot of Jews who wrote a petition to Lincoln, and he pretty much said, "Oh, I forgot you guys existed," and then he instantly changed it. So there's that, but there's also stories of, unlike the Irish or German or other other major ethnic groups, Judaism is. I'm not even going to go into what Judaism is. Judaism never had its own brigade, never had its own regiments. So there was a lot of Jews were very much mixed in with the rest. There was only about, I think, 7,000 Jews who served in the Union, and not even that many in the Confederacy. Soon I'll get to Grant's infamous order regarding Jews, but you'll notice that there was a lot of Jewish individuals and not Jews as a whole when it comes to unlike the Irish Brigade, unlike the many German regiments, Jews were thrown in, or they would rise as individuals. Has Senpai Indy ever noticed me? Senpai Indy has noticed my comments on their videos. They have responded, and they have they ever seen my videos? I do not know. If they have, I think they would be feeling very confident about what they've done, but they have not reached out to me. I'd be very worried if they did. I would probably be like, oh, I have to give them all of their stuff back, like I've been hiding in their basement. But he has noticed that things I've said, but yeah, I thought that'd be a fun to war game as a steampunk game. I have never been interested in steampunk, and I think it mostly comes from my aversion towards historical fiction, which is its own thing. But would a Civil War steampunk game work? Yeah, I could definitely a Civil War magic game, a Civil War. I don't know what else to go from the magic game. I mean, you couldn't do a fantasy. You can't. Civil War dragons, sure. I would love to see Lincoln and Jefferson Davis fighting on two dragons. That would be awesome. Well, Elias Parker. I sadly cannot tell you about Elias Parker. There's a lot of things I can talk about. History that's specific, not one of them. I'm gonna do a quick Google search and see what I come across and see if I can connect that stuff to anyone I can. Elias Parker. Lieutenant Colonel Elias Parker, I assume. Elias Parker. Is he? Oh, yes. He was he was Native American, I think Seneca, and he was with Grant for a long time. He got pretty high, I believe, Brigadier General, and he actually wrote the final terms of surrender. And I think a lot like how Jews rose individually in the Union, I mean also in the Confederacy, but the Confederacy, Native Americans were brigades, they were regiments, they were separate. In the Union, besides from allies, when Native Americans were in the Union Army, they were within the Union Army. They would rise and fall individually. So Elias Parker rose individually. How could have the war gone if they had had modern technology? If there was a modern day civil war between the same states, no question the North would have crushed even quicker. A lot of the military bases, a lot of the army, rest of the huge population centers, I think if they had modern technology, the war would have been over before Bull Run. I mean, yeah, it's just unlikely that it would have gone any further. Now imagining alternates where Caesar and Pompey travel forward in time to become generals of the Union and Confederate armies. Somebody should make that interesting. Pompey was a rich landowner, and Caesar rose individually through the army and was a politician. I would see Pompey definitely joining the Confederate. I think he would join the Confederacy, and then Caesar would join the Union. And then if they fought against each other, Pompey was a good general. I would have no doubt. But Caesar won against Pompey using some good hiding tactics, and I think that would have served him very well. Major General Gaius Ulpius Caesar, I think he would be within the Italian Catholic immigrant crowd. He would have raised in New York. His political connections would have probably made him a representative, maybe a one-term senator before the war. From there, he moved in to gain further notoriety through generalship. He had fought in the Native American wars earlier on, so he would have a good amount, but he would have to, throughout the early stages of the war, 61, half of 62, he would be a subordinate, most likely leading a brigade at first and then a division, before he would get his own individual command over a corps. Pompey was originally a member of the army. He had served for a long time. 1830s Mexican-American War, he was there. It was only recently, after the Compromise of 1850, he had made his way into politics. That seems about right. So from there, he would have worked with Caesar as they both tried to keep the Union together to serve their own political interests. But once the secession happened, he would have been very popular. He would have been a popular choice, and he would have raised his own men. Shucks. What he knows. From there, they would have become fighting rivals. They would have been skirmishing lines. They would have fought both as separate and also as subordinates. As Caesar would usually have the upper hand when it came to positioning. He would have always arrived at the right place. He would have been behind the Potomac when he needed to be. He would have been taking the hills when he needed to. But Pompey would have the morale of his men and the veracity, and with that he would be able to mirror the main army. But as the war went on and a lot of his veterans waned and he had to rely more on drafts, Caesar would have definitely won. I think that would be what would have happened if Caesar and Pompey had been time traveled into the future to fight. I would definitely see it going down a little bit like that. But also, generals who are good at a time, I mean, Caesar, Pompey, they knew how to do Roman warfare. If we time traveled them right before their battle of Pharsalus, and they time traveled, and one was Major General Meade, and the other was Lee, and they both just took over. I mean, they'd probably look around and they'd be like, what are those people carrying? So I think you'd have to transport them forward in time, and also, I mean, that would change a lot about them. I mean, if you took me and transformed me back into first century Judea, I mean, who knows how I would change. Boy knows, it's sort of the worst. Yeah. So, any other questions? I mean, I'm ready to stay up for quite some more time if you have any, but I don't want to keep you guys here later than you should be. Caesar and Pompey, that would be nice. Xerxes and Alexander, that could be. Huh. I suppose there isn't more stuff about, like, what happens if we took these two people and put them in a different time? That certainly brings out the storyteller. Yeah. Caesar and Pompey were very weird. There were a lot of rivalries in the Civil War. Sickles, Longstreet, yeah. McClellan, What history channels do I subscribe to on YouTube? First off, my buddy Field Marshal. He has been around for a long time, and I've really liked his work. He is great, especially when it comes to 18th century history and before. I watch all of his stuff. Warhawk does great animated map videos on the Civil War. I've been on their Discord. It's amazing. They really know what they're talking about. Then, of course, the major ones: Armchair Historian, Cynical Historian, Mr. S Productions, Canubis, all of them. Sam Aronow, a very nice man, makes Jewish history videos if you want to learn more about that. I mean, even if you don't care about Jewish history, you just want to learn about some good history, he's pretty nice there. Sorry for keeping you up so late, Dancing Pot Plant. Unknown history channels that I mean, of course, I watch the big stuff. But smaller ones, I think Warhawk, Field Marshal, Sam Aronow, all those guys do pretty well. Yeah. One misconception about the Civil War that you really hate, that these generals were mythical, that all of these people were beyond people. Lee, Jackson, Grant, Meade, all those, these people were smart. Lee was a good general. Jackson was a good general. Grant was a good general. They were not the ones who won the war. They were the leaders of the ones who won the war. Yeah, Pompey and Caesar, they would definitely try to use bayonets to stab each other instead of shooting each other. So, a lot of the myth making around the Civil War that I really hate. And then the Lost Cause, of course. That is the bane of my existence. I wouldn't say the bane of my existence, but it is not good. But those are the main ones. And then to the surgeon. Oh wait, did the streams go up? Oh, if the streams go up, yeah, I'll put it in the description. I just didn't know. Yeah, don't worry, Dancing Pot Plant. I will put them in the closest video's description. Yeah. Those are all review. Kraut has been very gracious. I've learned a lot from him. I started watching him before, and then when he started talking to me, Senpai Kraut, when he started talking to me, that blew my mind. He's very nice, but he's big. You probably know about Kraut if you know about me. Those are probably the big people I watch. He's a big person I watch. The small people I watch, yeah. Oh, Mythology with Mike, No History are both under. I'm trying to think of people who are under 10,000 subscribers. Mythology with Mike. I think Al-Muqdam, he does Islamic, and History with Hikmah are both in this smaller range. But I'm trying to think of like really small. I would go with them. What's the Lost Cause idea? So the issue of when we're talking about the cause of the American Civil War, there's always the states' rights, slavery crap, and states' rights. There's a reason some generals fought were loyal to the state, and they weren't willing to fight about history. But why did the states secede? They were worried about the fact that Lincoln did not want to spread slavery at all. He would not allow it. And when we're talking about, nowadays we might think, wow, he didn't want to spread slavery. What does that mean? It means that the Senate would be anti-slavery for the future. That there would be no more slave states. It also means that those representatives would be there. They were worried about the future. They were worried about how... Oh, Kings and Generals is great. They were worried about losing their political power. were losing their financial power because if they couldn't expand slavery, they would have to keep on using the same dirt and would deprive it of the nutrients. And they were worried about socially. If slavery became unpopular, they would have to start, I believe, I don't remember the term, but if they went bang, you couldn't just free a slave, a human being, because you had to pay money to this. You had to give money to the state or the slave, depending on where you lived, to let them go free, as a way to make sure there weren't a lot of free African Americans. So they were also very worried about slave rebellions or African American rebellions. So they saw the preservation of slavery as their only way to stay powerful, stay in their current social climate, and stay powerful financially. So that's why they left. Now, why did individual soldiers fight? On the whole, fear of what freedom of slavery would do. There were other reasons why. There was other reason why individual politicians changed. The idea of the lost cause myth is it wasn't about slavery. And that just isn't true. It doesn't mean that people who live in those states nowadays are bad people. They aren't. It doesn't mean a lot of the things that I believe Sherman baiting is talking about, or like these people were uncivilized. No, a lot of these people were poor and were taught if a free person of color will kill you, or if these slaves ever get power, they will kill you. And when you get told that over and over again, you start to believe it. I blame a lot of this on many more powerful people who saw a vested interest in keeping it up. Because for a lot of people, slavery was not a good thing. And not just was it for African Americans, obviously, but it also wasn't good for anyone except those at the top. So they lied and they secured their voting base. But in the North, where it wasn't as good, there was also Puritanism. I don't want to talk too much about the financials because that usually overshadows it. But yes, there was a financial aspect to those ideas of emancipation. But mostly, God, bloody noses are the worst. The North was okay with Tawfiq. I can't say that name. Bye, man. The idea was, if we free people anywhere, they will rise up and kill us. So that's why the South seceded. The Lost Cause myth came afterwards and said, first, African Americans were better under slavery, which, I mean, that's just that's just not true. And then they were moving on. It's a way of usually defending what the seceded states did, which just, I mean, committing treason so you can preserve slavery is just not good. So that's what that myth is. And it comes from political reasons. It comes from a not wanting to, because they were wrong. Their theory was, if there are free people of color, they will rise up against us and they will kill us. And that just didn't happen. So they created the myth. We weren't fighting over slavery, we're fighting over, well, first the myth was, come on, guys, look at these African Americans. They were better off under slavery, which is pretty bad red territory, and then that's why they created segregation separate but equal. They need to be separate. Nate Turner did do that. There were slave rebellions. I mean, the idea was, though, that if we have free people of color, first off, the idea was, if we have people in other free states, they will know that slaves can rise up. They'll know, not that Haiti was actually where they were worried with slaves. They saw, and if news got from Haiti to America, which of course it did, and then it went down in slaves, they started knowing this is possible. But they were very worried about free people of color, working with slaves to not just fight for freedom, though Nate Turner was something else. There was the 1811 New Orleans German revolt. There was, I don't remember the names. There was actually a lot of small, I don't want to say a lot, there were some small slave revolts around, but they were really worried about was supplanting. They were worried that if you freed African Americans, they will murder us all. That was the idea. And with Pepper, I can't speak today. It was said over and over again, not because it was true, but because it was profitable for the people at the top. And then when the idea of Lincoln not allowing slavery to continue, they would lose the Senate. New states would have to be free states. There's no future for them in the Senate. So then you just need the House of Representatives. Then you have the Senate. And if all those states are free states, then you have the governors. That's a constitutional amendment. So they weren't worried about Lincoln ending slavery immediately. They were worried about 30 years down the road, 20, 40. So that's why they broke away. Because an interesting thing I've always thought about is, were they breaking away to create their own state? It's not state, their own nation? Or were they trying to use it as a bargaining chip? And this has, I've always thought about why they broke away. And I think it's to create their own nation. I think they wanted a nation that they were certain of would move towards taking over other states in Central America and South America and some of the islands. So I think they broke away to form their own state that would continue expanding. But I actually don't know if they... But there's also a part of me that's like, they must have always thought we would go back in there. So maybe they would have broken away, expand slavery, and then reintegrate. To rejoin the Union. But no matter what, the reason the states on whole seceded was to preserve the expansion of slavery. Yeah, and that the Lost Cause myth denies that. What was the cause of war, and how have any understanding going into today's understanding of the cause? I mean, I think I just went over a lot of that stuff. But a lot of an interesting thing is, I began the war at Fort Sumter, which is when most people plan it starting. But the first state seceded immediately after news of Lincoln's election came out. And the war was fought because the Confederate States were not willing to accept Lincoln as their president doing what Lincoln wanted to do. And the reason, so it was secession. The reason they seceded was slavery. So using the transitive property of math, I'm not a fan of math, but just doing that, that's how you get it. And that's why I feel weird about planning it at Fort Sumter, because at that point, that's when the first violent shots of the war were fired. But before that, Confederates were overrunning federal positions to seize ammunitions, mints, anything and the like. So that was a lot of the early stuff of the war. 1860, South Carolina seceded. Other states would soon follow. After the war, states would secede. Virginia seceded, North Carolina, Arkansas, Tennessee, I think. Those are the 4 states that seceded after Fort Sumter. So, yeah. And there's a reason I wanted to cut off my series at Bull Run. And that's because if I wanted to accomplish one thing from those first episodes, it was this war was fought this way, politically. It was fought as states seceded, as state support was determined, as these minor skirmishes determined early transportation positions. They were fought over railroad bridges. They were fought in railroad cars. And I hope I succeeded not succeeded in doing that. But I'm not entirely sure I did. And I guess I have to continue the war now. But that's why the war was fought. And then, of course, as the myth continued, the myth had to be held on to. It couldn't, so it evolved, I guess, or mutated. Evolved, it takes on a connotation of upward progression. Mutation is just change. Some of the major military innovations over the course of the war. Everyone loves their fancy guns. You have you had first off expansion of range. Range was the main factor for determining how useful a gun was, not how many bullets you could put into it. So 1861 to 1863 Springfield rifle, you would see improvement in range. But of course, you have your multi-shot guns. You have your Spencer carbines with 7 bullets. Your Henry rifles with 16. Your Gatling gun machine guns. You have your newfangled cannons that could do more. Ironclads were before the war, but they really took on after the war. Not during the war. So, you have that. And so those were a lot of the major innovations. I'd say the major determining things was innovation in infrastructure. Railroad lines, new roads, not new sea stuff. I was about to say something very dumb like new rivers, which no army was creating new rivers, but a lot of the rail lines, roads, those were the major innovations that changed how we were doing things. But also a major change in tactics. Early in the war was a lot of line battles. Battles were won by charges. But you gave a bunch of people a bunch of rifles that can stop a charge. So as generals started learning how to use them as, not just generals, commissioned officers down to non-commissioned officers, they started learning how to use their military inventions. But you also have those wacky stuff that no one used at all. Though you have those steam guns, you have those gigantic cannons. Yeah, logistics. Logistics are very cool. Supply. I mean, I guess that's kind of wraps around back to the war elephants. Oh yeah, they are very cool. They might have been very effective, but how are you going to get them there? I mean, you could have. I mean, I always think it's like, what if the Confederates had an AK-47? Great. Do they have the ammunition for it? Do they have the people who know how to use it? Do they know how? Not only do they have the people who know how to pull the trigger, do they have the people who know how to use it tactically? The innovation of tactics, sure thing. So these battles were, by and large, fought in lines. You would advance with lines, and that slowly evolved over the war, but also siege. Now, I'm going to burp by a minute. The sieges changed how you would do things. We would have trench warfare first showing up around Petersburg, even before then. So as you started having people who don't need to rely on the bayonet charge as much, you really don't need to have them so closely packed together. You don't need to have them ready to advance in a column. So they start spreading out more. Early on in the war, Rosecrans used what the Boers would later develop during their war, where they would fire in advance, where your line would shoot, duck down, find whatever cover you could, and then wait again. So when you don't need to charge with bayonet, when you don't need to rely on that physical force, you can be more spread out. You can, I don't want to say like look for cover, because of course they were using cover even before, but you have more options of where you can go. So as that happened, they started moving out more and more. Regiments were starting to act more and more individually. Brigades were starting to act more and more individually. Down to teams were starting to move more and more individually. Warfare is taking things, usually. There's also war of attrition, but in this case, when you want to take battle, when you're in a battlefield, you have your major positions to take. I want that town. I want that hill. soon it started becoming less and less. I want that forest. I want those rocks. I want those things that I can use not just to make it harder for them to charge me. I mean, you can charge across the field, and then if they're hiding in the trees, I mean, it's not that much more of a push. But isn't it if you're being fired at? If trees, plane. You exile those trees. Usually before it would be here, and then they could open fire, and then the charge had more punch. Wasn't as slowed down. But if they could start firing at you from where those trees are, you might want to stop meeting in those. I don't want to play too much into the misconception. Oh, good sir, what happens if we used against those rebels that open field where we all stood in lines while they shoot at us from those trees? No, of course you fought still on plains. But what you told men to go to? When you told men to spread out more, those changed. You still fought in lines, but your line was more wide. Your line might include more sharpshooters. Your line would include more things there was a greater focus on firepower and less on the charge in the Union. The Confederacy, they also did that change, but it was just way more minor. Because gun numbers matter. When you have 50 people shooting against 10 people, that's important. If you have 10 people who can do an effective charge against 50 people, that can do a lot. So the Confederates relied way more heavily on the bayonet than the Union did. So in the Union, there was also the introduction of Berdan sharpshooters, and of course you would have other you have other regiments designed specifically to do these long-range combat, but that was a major change. You'd also have more focus on field works because you can dig a trench all you want, but once they're in there with bayonets, it's not going to matter much. If you can stop them before they get there with effective rifle fire and cannons, then yeah, you might want to place more time into digging a wall in between you and the enemy's bullets. So there was a lot more of that. Also, strategically, as the war progressed, there was a lot less hope for that one knockout blow. When they were going into Bull Run, they both were thinking onwards to Richmond, onwards to D.C. When they got to Gettysburg, they were thinking, Jesus Christ, what am I going to do next? Well, we were still kind of thinking onwards to D.C. afterwards, but both sides stopped hoping. Not hoping. They stopped expecting more knockout blows, except Loon. So they stopped. I think it kind of went down and down. It was stopped. Because logistics hubs, they got moved out. You have railroads you need to take. You have all these things, but there's always the next railroad. So instead of taking the enemy's capital, which was everything, you had to do more and more. There was less hope for a quick war and more begrudgingly accepting a long one. So as that went down strategically, you don't hope for a bayonet charge that will destroy the enemy's army. You hope for a change where you can shoot, have them rout, maybe swoop in with your cavalry, take a couple prisoners, and then go on to the next battle, where you can hopefully do it again. Lee was not comfortable with that. He really wanted hindsight's 2020, or 2021 now, but he really wanted a charge where he would win. He relied heavily on charges. They did him quite well for quite some time, but it wasn't the war. It was just the wrong war for that. So for the Union, the innovation of tactics was a greater reliance on firepower and less on the bayonet. For the Confederacy, it was a lot more. It wasn't as big a change. You're gonna have to give me a second. Hey, I'm back. Bonjour, Oren War Daves. I do not speak French and I do not speak foreign language as well. Bonjour is about as much French as I know. I guess oui, baguette, croissant. That's about as much French as I know. But good to see you. Now, another thing to note is generals had a lot of baguette. Generals had a lot of political pressure on them to get results, to win it quickly, to do all. Did I come a little bit? I don't wish to discourage you. I still have a lot of gusto and unearned energy left in me, but we have been streaming for quite some time. But good to see you. Yeah. Bye, Dancing Pot Plant. So, when it comes to what generals had to do, a lot of it was dependent on what they were told to do. You win a battle, that's easy to say. You need to take this because Senator Hansen has some money in there, and I think if we take it, we can get his vote. You need... Yes, traffic on this is still going on. I cannot be stopped. Well, I probably will be stopped soon. There was also a lot of pressure on these generals to take certain things, to do battles in such a way, even to use certain units. You don't want to wipe out a state's male population around the age of 18 to 35. That will lose you support. So, what they had to do was start to decide which regiment will we sacrifice today. Now, this wasn't widespread. It wasn't like you would have Representative Herman come down and be like, "You've been using too many of my state's men today. I would recommend Virginia." But it was a thought in my mind. I can't lose these groups. I can't use something too much, or else it will break, kind of thing. With human lives, of course. So that also determined a lot of what generals did. I'm not sure if it went tactically. I can't imagine right now. But strategically, yeah. Especially with Lincoln towards McClellan. He was not okay with McClellan's slow approach. I couldn't say I'm either. Well, it's not like I'm McClellan's boss. But he told him to move quickly, and then there was a lot of political pressure on Lee. You have to win, kind of, like... Especially with... I don't want to get too much into, like, the politics of 1864, because I'm not as familiar with them as I am with what has already happened. But as... Hi, Dancing Pot Plant. I guess 120 is a little late for you over there. You guys can just like submit a question. I can do a video on it, or I'll do another live stream. You don't need to make yourselves go insane for this. Yeah, but generals, we in 1864, there was not as much hope for Stalin. Before the Emancipation Proclamation, it was a lot easier for the British public and French public to accept the Confederacy. Afterwards, it became a lot harder. So as it went on and on, it stopped becoming less of if we can stop the Union, more of we need to defeat the Union. There was a lot less hope for a settlement where Britain and France would come in and say to Lincoln, "You need to stop." It was a lot more of like, we need to make them stop. Are there any interesting stories about well-known battles which came about because... interesting stories? Of course there's interesting stories. The 2nd Minnesota. The 2nd day of Gettysburg. Do you see those colors? Go take them. Alone, a regiment charged into a sea of opposing combatants. And they did take those colors. to the tooth and nail, each man fought. Bayonet, butt of musket, anything they had, trying to strike and take those colors. They came back. Most of them didn't return. That's a very interesting story. It's pretty well known. And then, of course, you have the famous story of he stands there like a stone wall referring to Jackson. I'm not going to lie. Personally, I don't believe said story in the way it's usually told. That's a very interesting story. Then you have individual stories of a regiment, usually. The 5th Missouri Infantry. Union. 1861, St. Louis. They march out in the dead of night. Column. In order to make sure they get there on time. Where? Camp Jackson. Camp Jackson is a training area for the Missouri State Guard. Missouri at this time, neutral. What does that mean? They're not either for the Confederacy or for the Union yet. But they do know some things. One, at Camp Jackson, there are Confederate weapons. President Jefferson Davis of the Confederacy has sent over boxes of ammunition, weapons, and what is love? Well, I think we all know what the great philosopher said, baby don't hurt me no more. But the 5th Missouri was a Union regiment. Camp Jackson, I can talk about the Camp Jackson affair. I've already done it. I probably should redo that episode. But the motive was to protect a politician's personal wealth. Many men dying for someone's personal wealth. It wasn't just the politicians. It was also the people who paid the politicians. It was also the state's economy. Now, for most, not to get too much into the economics of the war, the motive, they wanted, people voted to secede because both they made money from it, their state made money from it, they had power because of that money, their state had power because of it. So yes, it was fought for personal wealth. Why did Lincoln fight back? I would probably say if the South was a financial burden, he would have cut them free. Your answer was darn good too. The wealth drives a lot. As much as I wish it didn't, wealth means a lot of what we do. So Lincoln did want to preserve the Union, but he also had to. It was a mandate. He couldn't. The second where he would either have to say not slavery, secession is legal, they can do this, it's fine. Then they fired on this. If he said that, then there would have been a war. But he also kind of had to say, yeah, you can't do this. As president, I'm not actually entirely sure legally how much wiggle room he actually had with that. I mean, he could have maybe said, you can go. I'm not entirely sure. Thanks, Aegis Flow. Yes, I'm well aware of that meme. So I don't know if Lincoln would have decided to have held on to the Union as hard if it was a financial burden of the Confederacy was a financial burden. But why did the South secede? Money and power, and also socially, that's what they thought was best for them. Because, I mean, slavery is abhorrent, but it kind of was. Mention a successful charge, but with a heavy toll on life. Oh yeah, sure. A successful charge. Chancellorsville, the greatest victory of the Confederacy. They charged, they obliterated an entire flank of the Union, but it was at such a cost where we felt like, I can't do this anymore. He started feeling like more and more, I can't let the enemy go. It was so, he did kill more of them than he suffered, but percentage-wise, it was just not acceptable. A lot of these charges actually had a pretty hefty toll. Charging was, I mean, it wasn't very good. Other charges. The charges in the 7 Days battle I will be getting to very soon in my week-by-week coverage. Gaines Mill, it was actually one of Lee's early engagements. Lee loves charges. I can't get through this enough. and he saw the enemy line. He's like, "You need to do something about this," because they were dug. They weren't very well dug in, like World War One, but they were in a good position. And he's pretty much told his men, "Okay, everyone, we're going to coordinate this very well. We're all going to move it." Oh yeah, Napoleon. Hi from. I remember that stream actually. That was very nice. Hi man, I'm glad you could make it in time to see me ramble on for too long about stuff. He said we're all gonna charge at one time, okay? And he kind of did. I mean, that charge was very impressive because trying to get tens of thousands of men to charge all at once, impossible. You're just not gonna do it. They didn't even have like synchronized watches or anything. It's just not possible. But that charge was successful. It wasn't what we would think of successful, but it was successful for the time. But it was done with a lot of loss of life. Because these charges were always a gamble, not just in will they work or not, because you're saying, okay men, I want you all to walk towards the place where they're shooting at you from with these bayonets. And then when they got close enough, they could start running. But during that time, I don't remember exactly when each general would say, now you can start running. But you would have to first walk through cannon fire. You'd have to leave your positions, get up, and start moving towards the people who are trying to kill you. So, not only during that entire time, even before you yell and then move in towards the charge, you have that problem. If I remember right, were unpopular, that units would come very close indeed, but keep firing, not going with the bayonet. It depends. They were very unpopular. Because, of course they were. Because you telling me you don't want to get it. It's just kind of basic human psychology. I don't want to be near the Sharpie things. And that's what bayonets are. They're very sharp, pointy, and they're very good deterrents of getting in close. But also standing still was kind of hard. So if I'm not very well versed in 19th century warfare, but if I were to theorize from my limited knowledge, there at hills, you get to this point and you're about to go over. I'll just stop right here, poke my head up every now and then, take a few shots there. But I'm actually about to cover a battle where they were told to charge. 5 regiments were told to charge, and they all stopped right at the top of a hill and just decided to keep on firing in and in. Now, Europeans with their charges. Now, in the 1850s, so now the last major European war before the American Civil War was Crimean, when it was European versus European. And of course, that is going. They didn't do a lot of charges. They did a very long siege at Sevastopol. But that's not what many were training for. They were training for revolts in the colonies. They were worried about tribes threatening them. So in Europe, it made sense. Europe had the money, had the financing to have professional armies who wouldn't break under pressure. But Indians are revolting. What do? Go charge them. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they'd often get close, fire volley, then charge, because a group of crazy folk running at you, then you run. I mean, it wasn't. I know I'm in the Indian, I think 1856 Indian Revolt. I'm not as familiar with that as this. I can tell you for the Anglo-Zulu War, the British relied way more heavily on volley fire and of the like. Not just in the famous Battle of Rorke's Drift, which has been immortalized, or the Battle of East Lacedemona, where they got in too close. But in the final battle of the Anglo-Zulu War, it was actually quite interesting. They would kind of make a miniature box where they would have the Zulus charge them, and then they would open fire from 3 sides around them. And from what I've read, this was uncommon. because they weren't used to fighting against people who wouldn't break when they charged. Neither was Lee. Neither were a lot of cavalry commanders. They wanted the charge. They didn't like the time. They didn't like the wait. McClellan, Halleck, these people were built for sieges. But for many generals, the hope was, I will charge valiantly. My men will make it over the top, and we will seize the battlements, and we will raise the colors, and it will be over. And they kept on charging. But for the men, their hope was, I'm going to live. That was what many people wanted. Some of them wanted glory. Many of them actually wanted glory. Some of them wanted riches. I don't think any of them got very rich off of the war, during it at least. But for many of them, the sense of survival takes over. And even though it might have not made sense to stay back and fire, it felt right. And I know actually there are times where generals said charge and the men just said no. But that didn't always happen. Many men did charge. There are famous bayonet charges. But also, all the time you would charge and then the men would just run before you. Because they don't want it. Because when you're charging, that isn't your time to aim and shoot, so they most of the time had a very good chance of getting away. But also, even if you all stopped and fired, what are they standing there isn't going to do them any better. So quite a bit of the time, they would charge, and then they wouldn't need to go over. So I bet there's also kind of the assumption, if I charge, they're going to run. And when they don't move out, you might have a second thought about continuing said charge. You might have a different thought about going over and trying to fight them hand on hand, especially if you're not well trained, which many of these people weren't. The army was very small during right before the American Civil War. So a lot of these people didn't see combat before. They weren't professionals. So for many of them, yeah, they have a sharp thing too. And also, not everyone had a sharp thing. The Confederates had chronic, deep supply problems. Many of the time they couldn't, not many, some of the time, I should stop saying many or most, because statistics prove me wrong. Some of the time, they just couldn't give all of their men bayonets. Sometimes, you just have to club them over with your shotgun. The Union did quite a bit better and also didn't charge as much. It did a lot better with supplies and didn't charge as much. So, a lot of them had bayonets, they just didn't always use them. But the Confederates relied way more heavily on close fighting. They also couldn't always provide them with what they needed. Swords were used for people with cannons. And I can tell you from all of the ones that I've read, when people with cannons were charged, the second they got close enough where they realized my cannon won't stop them from charging, they didn't stay at said cannons. I can also tell you, as people started charging cannons, and then they got in range where the cannon could act like a shotgun, sometimes they didn't continue the charge of the cannons. Because when you close range close enough, your gunfire becomes way more accurate. And if you're charging a very weak position, you have a lot better chances. You think you have a lot better chances of staying back, firing a few rounds, and let your fellow comrades in arms charge without you. And if I stay back and fire a little bit, that won't be a huge plan. Now, if everyone does that, that's a different story. But you're not a corporal, you're not a sergeant, you don't have to worry about them. You have to worry about yourself when you're a private who charges. Yeah. Accounts of grape shot are horrific. Yeah. It's a gigantic... We always think of grape shot canisters. There are stories of just... there are accounts in northern Missouri of people who were using logs as cannons. They would carve into them, push them in with the gunpowder, And then instead of using shot or a grape shot canister, they would put forks, knives, nails, anything in there. And then you would see dead bodies with said things in them, because this wasn't the war we think of today, where you have manufactured bullets, where you have standardized weaponry. Well, you did have standardization back then, but it was a lot less professional per se. It was a lot more where you would take grandpa's gun out. It was a lot more where you would hack at the enemy with knives. And when you started doing log cannons, yes, they were called hollowed logs. I don't know how extensively they were used in the rest of the war. But in the Battle of Athens, Missouri, I have mentioned it before as the northwesternmost battle, because it was fought with islands, they had a hollowed out log where they tried to use it like a shotgun. They placed a lot of gunpowder in the back. They then put all their stuff in there, and then they lit it, and then it blew up in their face. It didn't work. It didn't work. Other hollowed logs did work for a time. They were not... hollowed out log cannons were not, let's say, reusable forever. They were short-term solutions to huge problems. Yeah. I mean, you also have to, again, this war was really, it was unprofessional. Battle of Shiloh, people were just getting out of their houses with like, hey, can I have that old musket from when we were on the frontier? Yeah, I'm bad down the log cannon. I think a lot of the problems actually with the log cannon, these people didn't know. How do I become funny? I have no idea. I have not been funny for a long time. Ever, in fact. Battle of Athens, Missouri. Yeah, that's where the log cannon blew up in their face. I also think it was just an overall Confederate defeat. I don't have the script in front of me, but let me see if I could summarize. There were some pro-Union Missouri men in there who were outnumbered, so the Confederates from neighboring area who were unprofessional. A lot of the battles in Missouri and a lot of the battles in the early war, you would have groups of people. Well, it'd be like if you and all of your buddies who agree in politics decide to start fighting. What are they going to bring? They're going to bring whatever they had. I mean, there was also a lot more guns per person. Battle of Athens, Missouri, it was a bad day on the log cannon. Also, these people didn't know what they were doing. I don't want to laugh at their choice as a lot, but they built these cannons, and they weren't like artillerymen. They just didn't. No, they were concerned with the similarities. I think it'd be great. If you know of any other usages, I think it'd make. I could probably talk more about improvised weaponry. Taiping and the American Civil War. They were fought around the same time. LimeTube, you are way more knowledgeable in this than me. You guys should go check out LimeTube. I don't want to speak on your back too much. He has done a very recent history video on the myth surrounding American Revolution, but he's very famous for speaking the entire script of Shrek day by day, which I think is a way more important historical endeavor than whatever I'm doing. Love you, LimeTube. Yeah, I'm going to have to defer to you. And go research. If you know any other usage, I think it'd make for a great unexpected counter in a war game. I would also recommend, if you're going to do that, try beer bottles and swords. Surround it. You can have a bunch of drunk hooligans around the log cabin. Not log cabin, log cannon. Has anything come up on General Kirby Smith? Nothing major yet. And I don't, in fact, I can't even tell you. If I have not the best memory of what I've talked about so far. But, funny enough, so far, well, not funny enough, so far, not a lot of major players has shown up. I will make a video on improvised weapons. Dancing Pot Plant, please go to sleep, man. This cannot be healthy. I will and I will be in the comment sections for you. I will make that improvised weapons video. Please go to sleep. This cannot be healthy. General Kirby Smith. A lot of the major players of the war hasn't come up yet. Sherman came up briefly in Bull Run. Robert E. Lee is very soon. I don't want to spoil. He's going to play a bigger. He's going to become a bigger player soon, I expect. I don't know what's happening until the week comes, but if I had to put money down, he might become a big player. But a lot of the main players haven't come out yet. So there's that. Would you do Union and Confederate Marine actions? Of course I will. I mean, those are going to bleed into the normal. Thank you for showing up, Dancing Plot Plant. Those actions already come up during week by week, and I will probably talk about the Marines separately in a video later on. Yeah, the U.S. and Confederate Marines. I would probably do a separate video on each, going over their transformation. You could, if I'm going to place that, probably that won't happen for quite some time. I'm sorry, American Celt, but I will probably do that if I continue as planned. Yeah. Why did so many slave states join the Union? They didn't. There was 4 slave states that stayed in the Union. Only 2 of them unequivocally stayed in the Union: Missouri, Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky. Why did they stay in the Union? Yeah. Because one, quite a bit of them wanted to. In Missouri, I could speak very well of. St. Louis was a heavy immigrant city. Germans, Irish during this time. And they really didn't like slavery. They also really didn't like slave owners outside of the city, because they looked down on them and they wouldn't give them work because they were too busy relying on slave labor. So they really kept to themselves. And there was also a lot of racism against them. Germans were actually frequently called Dutch during this time as kind of a slur around the city. So that's why they stayed. A huge population of ours didn't. Kentucky, that was mostly just... Kentucky was a very unionist and it was split between the two. Maryland and Delaware is very interesting. They allowed slavery, but there weren't a lot of slaves. There just weren't a lot of slaves. Delaware had barely any. Maryland was very small. And also there was a little bit of... in Maryland, there was also a little bit of political power imprisoning rivals, but they were kept in the fold because slavery wasn't that important. And also unionist tendencies. Yeah. As Peter Frank said. Have you heard the song Johnny Raven Battle Bull Run songs by Johnny Horton? I have. I prefer Battle of New Orleans and Bismarck from him, though. Yeah, they don't have the economic power, political power in them that they did in the South. Peter Frank said is very, and I don't want to come out as too against you, but that is a very good summary. I would delve furthermore in with Missouri, where planters did hold political power, but they didn't hold the kind of sway on mines that they did in other ways. But Peter Franks, you are right overall. Nothing in history is absolute. Is it true that Missouri had an internal civil war during the war? Yes, I would say. In the early days, there was the Missouri State Guard against Missouri regulars in the Union Army. So they fought. And then when the war moved further south into Arkansas, Tennessee, and Mississippi, Missouri was very divided. As the Union Army moved forward, claiming what, I don't want to make too many legal statements about Missouri since it was kind of complicated, but when the main Union Army or main Confederate Army wasn't there was a lot of fighting between people sympathetic to one side and they were the other. There was also a lot of bit of fighting on the Kansas border. So people from Kansas would come over to Missouri to fight. People from Missouri would go over to Kansas to fight. But Missouri was a pretty divided state even before. Specifically between the major city of St. Louis and the rest. This was before the invention of Kansas City as a major player, where it would join St. Louis in its fight against the rest of Missouri, which is its own political history thing. But yes, we did have an internal civil war. There were a lot of people because when the main Union army left, they left a bunch of people in control who were not good. I'm just going to put it out there. The Union authorities in Missouri relied a lot on people with Union sympathies, yes. People who were even anti-slavery, yes. But people wanted to make money off of it. They would, there were Union authorities who took unofficial taxes, unofficial payments, and by took I mean demanded. So that brought a lot of resentment. But there were also people who were not so happy with the new Union government taking over because there were people, especially further out from major cities, who maybe they didn't have slaves, but their customers did. They were the local shopkeep, and they wanted to. So that's where they came around. The fun fact for you all, Mark Twain joined the Confederacy. He joined it because it would be some good summer fun. And then the second he saw a Union soldier, he stopped being a member of the Confederacy. I don't know why. Politically, he joined the Confederacy. Politically, he was a very different man, but he did. My great-great-grandpa was in the Zouaves Delaware Regiment. Congratulations. Particularly, Cold Delaware was, I'm afraid, American killed. I don't know what yours. I was watching Grant Macers and it said, white Union officers shot black troops to keep themselves from being executed by Confederates during the Battle of the Crater. Was that true? I don't know about the Battle of the Crater, but I can say Union officers, especially, well, Union white officers, there weren't a lot of Union African-American officers, were definitely more willing to sacrifice African-American lives than they were white lives. And they were also, in some cases, way more willing to use African-American troops and also way less willing to use African-American troops. I don't know how to put it other than just back then, while some people were abolitionists, while some people were very okay with the idea of free people of color, many weren't okay with equal people of color, and that's a terrible thing. So I don't know about the Crater, but I can tell you African Americans were definitely used as bait for enemy combatants. They were used as slave labor for the Union. They were used as those who would charge first and soak up the bullets. I don't know about being executed to prevent being killed, but yes, white officers, if they were caught leading African Americans, were more likely to be killed on the spot. I don't know if they started shooting black troops to stop that, but I mean, I'm not entirely sure how much that would matter. Though in the Battle of the Crater, I think African Americans were taken prisoner. I'm not sure how well they were treated, though. I'm also not entirely sure if they were taken prisoner, but during that time, yes. It is not beyond the realm of my personal knowledge regarding the treatment of African American soldiers to say that white officers would be willing to do so in order to save their own lives. The truthfulness of that exact claim I cannot say, though. But going on, just to talk about the United States colored troops, the first usage of the U.S. colored troops would be the first Kansas United States colored troops in Missouri. It would take later on for usage of colored soldiers to move on to the east, where you would have men from the 34th, 35th Massachusetts who would win fame. But yes, the first use of colored troops was in the West, and they were also not treated very well, honestly. The treatment of African Americans' time was not very good. That was due to very much politically, it was not. It was just politically not okay to treat them as the equals that they are. But yeah. So again, to answer your question, I don't know, but very much possibly yes. Yeah. Well, how were American? They were given a seat in the Confederate Congress, but also they were there were Native Americans in the Confederacy who didn't need to, I guess, be given their own special seat to attain it. There were people of descent who attained political and military power. Native Americans were treated very. I don't want to. They're not a monolith. First, I mean, I'm not to get on your or anything, but Native Americans who joined the Confederacy willingly were very well accepted at the time. I have read reports of what they. I've read reports of what they planned to do to Native American territory in the future, which was not what they promised up front towards the American tribes. But in the Confederacy, Native Americans were treated as they weren't equal partners. No, they were allies and very useful allies. They were very good at slowing down the Union. They were very good at harassing Union men, but they're also very good at subduing Native Americans who disagreed with the Confederacy. Native Americans were used to silence Opothea in the Indian Territory at the time. So they were treated very well in the Confederacy, politically and militarily. How they were thought of by the people of the Confederacy was very similar to how they were thought of by the people of the North. They were not thought of as. I don't want to just say they weren't thought of as people because that's. They weren't thought of as. They were thought of as barbarians. They were. When people wrote them, they were very happy with their results, but they wished they would be more civilized, as they put it. It was very condescending how they looked on Native Americans, even when they showed themselves to be more peaceful than the soldiers they fought. When they showed more respect, they were very much looked down upon. They were seen as the other, and they were seen as. Where do I get my information from? Books, theamericancivil.war.com. I use for quite a lot of my Senate quotes. I use some online stuff. National Park Service has been a treat. American Battlefield Trust has some good articles that I can rely on. Rifles for what? I have unfamiliar. Did they have it made in the CSA? No. The CSA was not ready to. The CSA was more than willing to integrate them, I guess, kind of. They were more than willing to bring them in to the fold. They were not willing to help them win that transition, but war necessity promised it. And also, in many parts of the West, the American tribes were forced more south. Missouri, I know, forced a lot of tribes southwest. So Native Americans were more willing to be accepted into the Confederacy. Did they have it made? No. It's even if they were treated better, usually than they were in the North, where the North also really, when they tried to reach out to them, and when they said no, we're going to go a different way, they were very brutal. The Confederates were so far we've seen the Indian Brigade and the Battle of Pea Ridge, where there was that very infamous time where accusations of scalping, which I gave my personal opinions on that. But did they have it made in the Confederacy? No. Were they more respected and were given more power than they were in the North? Yes. Yeah. But the future for them in the CSA was as bleak as it was for them in the Union. I heard that the guy who made the ironclads for the Union hated the Union. Is it true that he did? There was more than one person who made ironclads for the Union. Is it possible that someone who made ironclad designs for the Union really did it more for the paycheck and was not the biggest fan? Yeah, definitely. I mean, there were people in Maryland who were not a big fan, but they were willing to accept the government's money. So I don't know who specifically you're referring to, but even if I did, I assure you I don't. Even if you referred to the person, I wouldn't know. Do you know anything about the battles in Arizona? Yes. The battles of Arizona were primarily fought against the Apache, I think. I'm not the best familiar with American tribes. A lot of these ones were smaller. If you see here, we have California, and then this entire area was not a state, and therefore not densely populated enough to be a state. So Texas. So this was no man's land. There was not a lot of major battles there. I think also Arizona. I assume you're going to talk about the modern state of Arizona, not the Arizona territory. But the battles in Arizona, they were fought between the Union and Native American tribes in Arizona. And they were also fought against the Union and Confederate skirmishers in Arizona, and then Native American tribes against Native American tribes, all of the like. What is better, the Confederacy or the Union? The Union. Union has Dan Sickles. I mean, obviously, it's the Union. Dan Sickles, they have that great guy, and that's all they need. They just need Dan Sickles. But yeah, especially a lot of the battles out here west. If I was to have like a Sharpie that I could erase, from here all the way to around here, you're gonna have a lot of skirmishes. So there were definitely battles, but if I was to, I couldn't tell you if there were any battlefields that were still around. The guy who made the first ironclad, I'm afraid, Yancey, I'm going to have to do more research and then I'll get back to you, but I just don't know. Were there any battles in the Plains and Mountain Territories like Utah and Kansas? Kansas, yes. I think there was the Battle of Springfield, Kansas, which I think went to a total of 10,000 combatants. But Utah, now Utah is here. There were no battles in Utah during the American Civil War, but that doesn't mean there wasn't a civil war with Utah. In 1856, Utah was run by Brigham Young as first governor of Utah. But there were some people who weren't Mormon moving through his territory, and he didn't like this, and I don't want to spoil it too much since I do want to talk about the Utah War. But the U.S. government did fight a war in Utah against the Mormon. Do you have any information on Confederate snipers? I can't think of any regiments off the top of my head, but I can tell you, yes, the Confederate snipers were very interesting because they didn't have the same kind of standardization that the Union did. They were the ones going out and trying anything they could to just find a way to... They were trying to find a way of anything that worked. They would make up their sniper rifles. They would try different tactics. They were the ones who, because they weren't standardized, they were a lot more inventive with their techniques. Especially with this. They weren't given the funding, supplies, and such, so they weren't as famous, and I can understand why they aren't written about as much. I certainly haven't come across as many sources I have about Berdan, but they were really the ones who were trying to move it forward. Now you guys have to give me a second. Was the U.S. Civil War actually over? Its rights? No, it was over secession, and secession was over because of slavery and how that impacted finance and power between the North and the South. Why do you like General Sickles so much? I mean, American Code is right. Dan is the man. He's the greatest, but he's just interesting. Fun fact about Daniel Sickles: he had more political experience than President Lincoln did in 1861. Dan Sickles is a man who was able to get away with murder. I mean, he wasn't obviously guilty because Daniel is the best. But, I mean, if I were to be a cynical historian, yeah, he got away with murder. Then he kept on winning. He was able to turn his killing of someone into a political boost as a defender of the women of New York and D.C. He was then able to spin from there off into a good ambassadorship-like position where he was able to tell the Brits that their queen, we don't want to fully go into there, but Daniel Sickles is a man who could take every single thing that would end anyone else and turn it into a way of moving forward. And that just fascinates me. He's the equivalency of a person who sees a car coming straight at him and finds a way to jump off that car into a successful business position. Do I do any Civil War reenacting? No. Reenacting is expensive, and I have a lot of respect for reenactors who go out there wearing that clothing in the heat. I wear some of that era clothing in my basement with air conditioning, and I still get hot. I mean, right now I'm actually pretty cold wearing a jacket, but I couldn't do it. Just the money, it's too expensive for me. Any information on the Vermont raids? I don't have a lot of sources on it, sadly. They were raiding from Canada into Vermont, and they actually were kind of successful. I mean, they weren't pivotal or anything, but the Vermont raids I will cover in my weekly episodes. So yeah. Do I know anything about the Bucktail Brigade? They were elite set across. Now, the interesting thing is a lot of the weird names with brigades is they kind of were more than one. So there's two Bucktails I know. There are the Irish with muskets that were outdated. There are also the skirmishing Bucktails. So, do I know about the Bucktails that at Gettysburg? I'm afraid I do not know American Kill, but I would say when it comes to stuff like the Iron Brigade, we all know there's that Iron Brigade with their famous black hats, but like there's also other Iron Brigades, the Foot Cavalry Brigades. That when you have a cool sounding name for your brigade, there are going to be other people who copy it. So I am not aware of what the Bucktail Brigade was doing at Gettysburg. Skirmishers and other were line infantry. What was their role before Gettysburg? From what I know, I'm pretty sure that they were line infantry. Because I don't think there were any dedicated skirmishing regiments. Berdan's sharpshooters were obviously sharpshooters before, but skirmishing before, not skirmishing, skirmishing during the war overall was a regiment by regiment. Pick your guys who you think have the best eyesight and go forth. Those will be your skirmishers. Did they do skirmishing? Probably. What was their main role? They were infantry, or they were artillery, or they were cavalry, because we didn't have that we didn't have those elite specialized units. The elite units of the Civil War were the ones who were good overall. Maybe they were good at specific things. You would have, the Stonewall Brigade, they are good on the charge. The Bob Schmerderly Brigade, those are good shooters. But in the end, they were infantry and they stood in lines, I guess. So the Bucktails, if I'm not mistaken, they weren't given any like special guns, right? I mean, I feel like I'm making a fool of myself here since again I'm showing my limit with my off-the-hand knowledge of individual units, but I don't even think the Berdan sharpshooters were identified as like they were the main skirmishers. I feel like we just didn't. I know from what I've read so far, we just didn't. Not we again. I'm not the U.S. government or any government at all, but they just didn't specialize into specific tasks. They were line infantry and they did some skirmishing sometimes. I hope that answered your question, American Celt. Now, when it came to, I also wanted to say, the thing that's always kind of, I don't have any problem with people who want to talk about specific brigades. The specific brigades are great storytelling devices. They're also very cool. I mean, pithy uniforms and all, but also, like, yeah, there are arguing there. So these specific brigades, they were specific brigades, specific regiments. They were famous. You would have these very cool brigades with very proud men who were very strong many times. And then these were very proud men. They would identify themselves by what they did. And then they would fight like the rest. The Stonewall Brigade fought with other brigades normally. They weren't like, oh, we'll send them out on its own, and then they would fight. What happened in Missouri during the war? Quite a bit. It started out with the Camp Jackson affair, which I was describing earlier, and from there it would move on to the Battle of Boonville. Brigadier General Nathaniel Lyon was quickly moving up against the Missouri State Guard, led by Major General Sterling Price, for a majority of 1861. And August 10th, 1861, outnumbered for some reason, it was a lot of outnumbered. He decided to fight a battle at Wilson's Creek. The Union lost there. They were pushed back. Nathaniel Lyon was killed at Wilson's Creek. From there, they were pushed back all the way to, I'm not sure if you can see, but from that river kind of area, I'm probably doing a terrible job right now, to Jeff City. They were very hard pushed back. But then the Union started receiving more and more men. They were then able to, while the Confederates were laying siege to a specific place, the Union was able to bring up its men, position them. Do you have that? From there, they would keep on pushing them further and further south. And then they would actually, after Lexington, there weren't a lot of battles on Maine, Missouri. They were pushed down all the way into Arkansas. During this time, the Mississippi River was a major battlefield. So Grant's first battle, the Battle of Belmont, was fought in southern Missouri. The Battle of New Madrid, or Siege of New Madrid, or Siege of Island Number 10, or all of these different names, were fought near the Mississippi River. But after a lot of 1861, Missouri wasn't. It was the Union's ground. Now, in 1864, Major General Price would try again to attack Missouri, and yeah, I'm breaking. I don't even know what's happening week by week right now, but he would try to get in Missouri, but a lot of that was actually through Kansas and would fail. So he was stopped a little bit in there. But also there were some minor battles between some Confederate sympathizers and Union sympathizers, but a lot of Missouri's battle was early 1861, and sadly I've moved past that. Though Battle of Pilot Knob is going to happen soon. Yeah. Any further questions? Over here it's now 8:59. I don't know how late. It's where you guys are. Yeah. Why do I think the Civil War was over slavery? Because, if I'm not mistaken, besides from North Carolina and Tennessee secession documents, they all mentioned that the current administration, to paraphrase Virginia's words, was hostile to the institution towards the state's position on, they were not so kind, I'm going to say, African Americans. Also, Confederate politician Alexander H. Stephens, who was vice president, gave a speech where he said the cornerstone rests on such. Why can we figure out what Jefferson Davis said during the time? Earlier on, before the war, he mentioned that the current status was the hostility towards the North, towards the institution of the economic binding of South, was untenable. Pretty much, they were all pretty much saying the North won't allow us to keep on with our use of the economic system of slavery towards it. That isn't true. I'm sorry. Which I can't think of other secession documents that didn't name the case with slavery. And I'm quite certain with the Cornerstone speech. Jefferson Davis, I wasn't trying to quote him directly. I was just giving the general idea of what he said before he left Congress. If it was, I can't believe it was over states' rights, because if you go back to the 1856 Dred Scott decision, a lot of the politicians, including Jefferson Davis, were very happy with the overturning of the Northwest Ordinance, which granted the states to decide what the institution of slavery would do. They would also overturn the precedent of Missouri towards these free state classes. It was over tariffs. Now, I'm not entirely sure what this is referring to, because, I don't know how. If it was just over tariffs, I would have assumed that they would have realized how foolish it would have been for them to have left when they would have been giving up a lot of their political power over tariffs, and instead forming their own nation. That would have been very hard. Now, right? By the way, what was the most primitive weapon did any infantry use in the war? Now, they used swords and hatchets, but I guess that's not the. They didn't. It wasn't like they were using matchlocks or anything. They were using flintlocks from the American Revolutionary War, and as such, they were pretty primitive with that. There was a lot of just men who were armed with melee weapons. So, primitive, I think it would be infantry weapons. Then from there, you would have flintlocks. Now, so I think that's about primitive. This is Union propaganda? You're damn right it's Union propaganda. Sickles all the way. Now, as I mentioned in my first New Recruits episode, they tried to do pikes as weapons, but those weren't used. Now, as I've said before, there were instances where beer bottles were used. Shotguns were used quite a bit by Confederates, since they had chronic, as I said earlier, supply issues, which forced them to rely heavily on what people could provide. I think that's all as primitive as get. There weren't a lot of. I don't think there were any knights fighting, but I think so. There were flintlocks used, shotguns, There were improvised weapons like the log cannon. That is not a fact Legionnaire. That is, I think, early 20th century rewriting of it. Yes, Ms. Ricks, there were plans to use pikes, and some were produced, but they were never used in battle because at that point, there is not a huge point unless you are playing on charging, which the Confederacy very was, but it never came to that for them. Well, I guess it went even further for that since they lost, but so pikes were used, yes. Well, not. They were manufactured. They were looked. They were passed around. They were never seen in battle by regular forces. What irregular forces did, what partisans did, they did what they could do. But hot air balloons, those were used. I wouldn't call them primitive by the day. They were used for reconnaissance. At the Siege of Yorktown, which is ongoing as of right now, they were used for reconnaissance, and they were seen out, but they weren't used for fighting. Come on, dear Franks, don't try insulting people. Yes, hot air balloons. They were used for reconnaissance, and they were primarily used by the Union. Professor Lau was head of the Union Army's Balloon Corps. They were primarily used on the east, though. You wouldn't see a lot of them popping up west, because hot air balloons, I don't know about how they are nowadays, but at the time, they were untested technology. They were hoped to be getting a leg up on the enemy, but also they were not a precise science. Well, they were a precise science that we weren't fully aware of. So, they were risky, but they were useful for reconnaissance. And Sickles, yes, I can bring anything back to Sickles, really enjoyed his ride. Good night, Yancy. He went up in a hot air balloon, was shot at, and was very happy to see that none of the bullets could reach him. It was a good way of doing reconnaissance over a huge area without the threat of being shot at. And that proved invaluable. It also proved in many cases to be misused and not fully trusted, but invaluable nonetheless. Yeah. I will not get into my own personal political beliefs because no one here should be basing off their political beliefs or should in the slightest bit care about my political beliefs over just my videos. That is not what I'm here to do, so I will not give them. Maybe I should start doing some Civil War ASMR. I am not lying about the American Civil War. I have not ever lied. Well, I have lied, just not about the Civil War. And I think the South would have won the war of Stone. No, I don't think a single general staying alive could have changed the war so drastically. I don't think. Thanks, Josu. Yes, it's me, Comrade Lincoln, and all. You think the South would? I don't think so. I think he would have been proving useful for delaying. I think he could have also proved to be a liability in his brashness. I'm eating Airhead soft-filled bites because I'm a 5-year-old with a 5-year-old's taste buds. Yeah. So I think that he could have been very useful with the small amount of forces as Confederate resources started to dwindle. In keeping up the Confederacy, I don't think he would have changed the end result, though. I also think if he continued his plans, he could have also thrown away a lot of the resources that the Confederacy had. You're right, Mr. Franks. Civil War isn't a political issue anymore. It's been quite a good time. Though I will have to say, there are soft-filled bites. If I am to move a little bit away from my Civil War duties and to my can you recommend it? This is good stuff, but it's also not memorable. It's the kind of stuff you would chew on. We have a sweet tooth craving. I like to go more sour personally, so usually when I buy this stuff at the store, I also buy some stuff with Sour Patch Kids. Why Legionnaire? The war's over. Not only is the war over, all the people who fought in it are dead. Its ripple effects have changed the socioeconomic, but you don't own fealty to any side. Or I guess you do own fealty to the Union, since we all live in the United States of America, and none of us live in the Confederates Army. But still. Areas are good. I remember always winning them. Well, I remember my arcade playing days when I was younger. These were the cheapest candy in terms of points, so I would usually buy a lot of them. Plus, it was a bunch of points towards the next one, towards the next candy prize. So, to me, it was just economically sound to get the airheads for my arcade points. Yeah. So, they're good. Now, I swear to God, the white mystery airheads, I don't know what's in them at all. They elude me, as it were. They're like goldfish. Now, I'm a simple man. So do I like goldfish? Yes. But I'm also very weird. So I don't prefer just normal goldfish. Cheddar Extreme goldfish is way better than regular goldfish. But will I eat regular goldfish? Sure. Will I specifically buy regular goldfish? Probably not. I prefer other snacks towards it. I mean, when I say that, I'm talking about. Have you seen the History series, Grant? I did not see the History. I have seen clips, and they definitely dramatized it from what I've seen. But it didn't look too bad to me. I definitely met people who were not the biggest fans, but I did not see it. From what I have seen, it's fine. I mean, when you put history to TV, you're going to expect some stuff. William McKinley, I think he was pretty happy to survive without getting shot, but I think everyone's happy without getting shot. How did he survive? I don't know. Especially like James Garfield, our later one of our president and professional hater of Mondays, survived a lot of the war, and I don't know how. Opinion on animal crackers. Now, animal crackers was never something I had in my house. So when I got it, it was a special treat. But also when I got it, it wasn't normal animal crackers. It wasn't just a cracker. They also put frosting over it. That silk, liquid white, not liquid, almost liquid coating on it. And dang, those were good. I got them at like summer camp, though, so I never was able to really get into it, but those, from my memory, those were really good. Now, I have a feeling I know where the next question is going. Position on just snack foods in general. Tostitos, I like. Tostitos are nice and salty and pretty good chips, especially Tostitos scoops. If you ever want an interesting taste, take those Tostitos scoops and just put some caramel into it. I did, and those are great. But Tostitos on their own are also pretty good, but they're not my favorite. Cheetos. Cheetos is where it's at, but I prefer pretty much every other kind of Cheetos over it. I prefer puffed Cheetos over regular Cheetos, and I prefer those weird, they say healthy cheese, but I swear to God that stuff are, even if they are more healthy, which usually is a downer for me, I really like them. Cheetos is the highest tier of snack for me. Do you know anything about Confederate gas? There's one way I can take this and say, yeah, I think they ate a lot of beans, but no, I don't know anything about them using gas as a weapon. Steam powered, but that was for transportation. It's also their failed steam gun. Using poison gas? I don't think so. That changes how my knowledge about uses of chemical warfare. And not to toot my own horn too much, I'm currently writing a paper on the use of tear gas. And from what I've learned about chemical warfare that wouldn't be around during the time of the Civil War. Using gas for transportation, I think they tried hot air balloons. And I'm not sure. Ruffles? Traffic cone? Do we need to stage an intervention? Really, Ruffles? Okay, man. I prefer to use my potatoes mashed over Ruffles. Also, potato chips aren't my thing. I like potatoes, but I prefer to eat them mashed, steamed, boiled, fried even. But in chip form, I would pass. Best potato chips, I will say, from what I've tasted of Ruffles, they're the only potato chip. I have not seen other potato chip brands. So, are they the best potato chip brand? Probably just by number. That is not the snack path I have decided to go down, though. Also, snacking is not something I do quite a bit. I usually wait till meals, and then meals, of course, you don't usually have chips with. So I've also, more than potato chips, which is not my territory, though, from, I would say, just overall not the hugest fan. When it comes to buying frozen dinners, you're going to want to go with Boston Market overall. Never go Hungry Man. Ever. Those are not good. Now, Indian frozen dinner, those are reliable. You're going to get some really good stuff. But also, over time, it's going to lose its punch. So, for all the time I lived in Chicago, for 5 years, I did, when I wanted to eat frozen dinner, I would go forward and get Indian food. But then, as I ate it more and more, it started becoming nothing. So I've taken a break and I've moved on to more Americana meals. In Boston Market, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, smoked turkey and mashed potatoes, everything. I enjoy their combination with mashed potatoes. I'm eating cereal, Josu. Keep it on. Cereal at night. I came from a family that was not okay with having the good cereal. They removed the honey from Honey Nut Cheerios. We had the whole grain Honey Nut Cheerios. So I was never a huge fan of cereal. But when we went out to, when we were in hotels, dang. Should I try eating only hardtack and black coffee for a week? Hardtack, sure. Black coffee, I don't drink coffee. Hardtack, I mean, to me, hardtack is just a worse form of matzah. So, I think I could probably do it. I might try doing it just because I'm insane. But yeah, Indian food hits different. I agree. I had an Indian friend. No, I have a friend of Indian descent, and I was invited over to their house one time, and I had been practicing for the last 4 years. So they were surprised when I was able to eat their spicy food, and I was very proud of myself. These are actually very healthy if they're not deep fried, as in chips or fries. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I like potatoes. I might be showing a little bit of my terrible taste and stuff. But yeah. Can you say anything about the difference in financing and banking between North and South? Sure. One had a lot of it, and one didn't have as much. The North, when people talk about industrialization, they make it seem a little bit more too obvious. That why wouldn't you industrialize? I'll tell you why. It's risky. It goes on a lot more. When agriculture, you have good years and bad years, but you always have years, I guess. So, development in the South was way easier, agriculturally based. They were a good place for natural resource. If I was trying to, as a whole, natural resources in the South, and we would need to build up northern economy with such. But a lot of the banking was done in the North. There was quite a bit. I also want to say each state had its own bank at the time. It wasn't until 1862, with the Legal Tender Act, that started becoming national currency, and the national banks started taking over. Because throughout the 19th century, there was a fight over a national bank in America. So, each state has its own banking. But if we're talking about financial capitals, it'd be around port cities. Boston Harbor, New York Harbor, New Orleans. So, but also, if I was to, I'm an investment firm. I can make a lot of money in the North, building railroads where I want to connect things. So, the North is where the North hit a lot of good luck, especially with our trade agreements. The South hit a lot of good luck in its agreements with the North, but soon finance and politics merged. It took two different terms, especially if I was to move on to religion theory. Tariffs were caused a lot by the difference between industrialization and agriculture bases of each one. There were a lot of protectionist tariffs on steel and industry of the like. So the financial future of the South was split between those close to the northern states and those not as powerful. But they were determined in their use of the social and political structure of slavery. So while states like Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, to an extent, had a bright future ahead of them if they stayed in the Union economically, though political power would be lessened, they could then use a lot of the railroad lines, maybe. North Carolina I'm not as sure with. but Tennessee and Virginia, yes. So a lot of that money was going into all this stuff. You also have to realize financing during this time period was done by the directive of the business. The government didn't have as much say as it does now. So when banking was done, and it's kind of like, there were state banks and there was also private banks. Those were situated in New York with New York Harbor. Financing was done where businesses thought they could do. They were along railroad lines and they were along such. And they relied on agriculture as the base to build off of. And for Virginia and Tennessee, they were seeing expansion. But New Orleans also was doing really good until financial panic of the late 50s. So financially, there was a north-south split, but it was that split, instead of being on the Mason-Dixon line, was moved down a bit, I would say, between the promise of, and also there was also a split west and east between Indiana and Ohio, especially with the future of financing, because you only really need railroads where you can move people and stuff. So out west, it was not as pronounced. Oh, I know, Mr. Franks. How long does it take? How do you make your videos, and how long does it take? Mr. Bomber, I make my videos using iMovie as my editor, and I use this microphone. I do my videos weekly, and my videos are usually posted Friday night over into I post Friday night, and then they are released Saturday morning. How long does it take to make the week? Each day I'm doing something. Sunday or Monday, because Sunday's a little late now for filming. I do filming. Then on Monday I have to transfer over to my editing computer, which is like a 2012 MacBook Air, and then from there I should move on to editing there. I do first audio when I have to cut things, like time for me to walk around my desk and like moving things around. Blank spaces as I look over at my teleprompter and pray that it will come up soon. The next day I have to cut around, move photos around, try to do a little bit of like Thursday, I'm usually working around, trying to get it all to work seamlessly. Trying to make sure that, I say the name and then the picture pops up at the correct time. Then Friday, thumbnail, download the video, and post it. Then it will be out on Saturday. Saturday, Sunday, I do writing of scripts, and then I start the cycle all over again. It's almost going to be 9 soon, and I'm afraid tomorrow I have school, so I could not keep up my promise of staying here until you guys got tired. I will probably, I will have to leave by then. I will spend the last 15 minutes talking about economy until, do I like Taylor Swift? Actually, sorry, Peter Franks, I cannot talk about how the financing and the control over the banks was completely made up as a past projection on the Federal Reserve, because, again, banking was controlled by private interests, and the national bank idea was a wartime measure because it was needed towards it. The Republican Party was a lot more okay with tariffs dictating that, and even their use of infrastructure policy was directed at by what economic interests the businesses wanted towards them, because there was a lot of things. Yeah. You're very kind, Mr. Frank. Do I like Taylor Swift? Yes. Now, from there, let's go on. Taylor Swift, early times as a country star. Then Love Story. That is still a great song. I especially like Taylor's version. The age moves it more, if you ask me. Then we hit her stride. This is where she's releasing We Will Never Get Back Together, which is a great song. I've listened to it quite a bit, and just the enjoyment and the way it connects with something inside of me was just the teenager. It's just that time when everything is so much. She's great at doing that. Then she continued on. And then she started losing it. And Jesus Christ, Taylor Swift, never rap again, please. I don't know why they did
why she thought that was a good idea. But that sick beat was not sick in the slightest. And then she started doing it great again. Oh my god. I loved shoot, what we keep on going round and round each time. Style. That is a great song. Style is great. I even like Bad Bloods. But then she started moving a little bit too dark, if you ask me. And she started rapping again, which again I don't know why she would do. So she started rapping, and that was very sad. And then she came back with Me, which was I liked. I liked Me. Weird that is to say. And I felt like it wasn't a great song. It wasn't style. But it shows me that she's going in a good direction. Then she went folk. I was very worried about this. And I didn't like Folklore. But oh my god. The song where she commits murder because of hers. Shoot. How was this name? How can I remember? Again, I'm up to say. So. She. Oh, God. What is the. I'm trying to remember the song where she. No Body, No Crime. That is the greatest song she has done since Style. Oh my god. I have listened to No Body, No Crime many times. For 2 weeks, my school was not in person and was instead online. Every break, I was listening to that song. And funny enough, I was listening to the YouTube poop version of it also, which is very good. Said, so yes, do I like Taylor Swift? Yes. Have I been following her career very intensely? Yes. Do I think she's invaluable? No, please stop rapping. But she is a good artist. Now, back to the... Yes, the Confederates really like projecting this strong government versus federal government versus state government. And I just don't buy it. Again, the Dred Scott decision was when the Fugitive Slave Act, the Dred Scott decision, the destruction of the Western Ordinance, the enforcement of slave states even against popular sovereignty, it just doesn't open up. And especially with banking, finance, it connects a lot, I think, emotionally with what Americans do not like the federal government overall. I personally do like the federal government. I don't like everything the federal government does, but overall I'm a fan. But I can tell you, most Americans would rather have local government stronger than state government. So, the idea of Lincoln passed the first taxes to pay for the war. He passed major changes in the economic system to pay for the war. But if you look at his platform for the 1860 election, he was very hands-off with the economy, kind of. He was very... Now, break into two things. His treatment of businesses and the Homestead Act, which would redistribute government land to people. I see a little bit of dichotomy here. A hope for... I don't want to say labor since this is before that time, but I will have to use the term since I can't think of a better one. Though for labor's future in the West, as the ideas and hopes of Americans did weigh very hard in the West, and the use of giving out land to them would be very helpful, even if they just sold it immediately. I mean, that's instant capital that they can then use. And in the East, as well, it wasn't good by modern day standards, but it was very good for the time. Business looked like it was doing just fine. It looked like it was doing just fine because there was other things that were overshadowing it, like the question of slavery and worries about foreign intervention and the idea of moving further along. But at the time, with the bigger questions over, it looked like business was doing just fine. So he was more than willing to work with... He would be more than willing to work with the government to help with fermenting business. And I'm breaking down business between businesses of the North and the agriculture of the South, which was way less organized. And also, Lincoln wanted to create a economy that worked within America, one that couldn't be susceptible to foreign powers economically. He didn't fully succeed because, of course, you can't. And if you could and then cut out every foreign investment, that would just hurt the economy. But he was definitely more wanting to create an eternal, sufficient economy. And doing that meant that those who would work better without tariffs, with a more free trade aspect, didn't like him. And then as this became more pronounced, as governmental intervention in the economy became a greater and greater issue, it started getting projected backwards. Yeah. Now, the Confederate control over finances is interesting. They were not as pronounced. In fact, there were a lot said. There was a lot said about how business and government would be in its own union. Instead of where it was helping hands, it would be in its own union, where the government and business were so intertwined. Business leaders would be politicians. Politicians would work as... It was... I wouldn't want to say corporatism because it wasn't, but it was the linking of business interests and the government in a way that isn't our thoughts of governmental redistribution or the use of the economy as a way. I mean, I guess with slavery it was kind of a way of ethnic supremacy. It was a way for the mixing of aspects of life. So financially, the Confederacy couldn't do any of that because it was too busy fighting a war and losing a war. But that was the plan. But also, the Confederacy, because of that time, there was a lot more economic freedom. I mean, in the end, economic freedom all went to waste as war destroyed all that economic infrastructure. But there was a lot of hope for when, I guess, all could be united once they were able to secede. But yeah, that's a lot to do with the economy. I will cover further and further the economy overall. He was trying to end the old-fashioned and traditional agrarian economy with its wealthy. He was trying to. Deep down, he wanted to end slavery. He didn't think he could. He didn't think he could, unless he got a constitutional amendment, which he didn't think he could. He didn't think he could do it and keep a united America, so he didn't. The agrarian economy with wealthy aristocrats. I like Lincoln. He's my second favorite president of all time. But I'm gonna have to clarify. Did he want to end its wealthy aristocratic rulers? Yes. He did not. Politically, these people were a pain in the Batotsky. These people were thwarting him everywhere he was. They're the reason he didn't get his Senate seat. They're the reason he lost re-election in the House of Representatives. So, he was not a fan of a lot of the old money. He was modernizing the economy. If you look with who he was working with, it was a lot of people who were all about modernization. But out west, he had no problem with promoting the agrarian economy. He did have a problem with them doing it via slavery, and he did have a problem doing it with people who opposed him. But he was okay with ending old-fashioned traditional agrarian economy with the current economic aristocratic rulers from families who were descended of families who opposed him. His modernization of the economy was done quite well. I don't think we state enough how economically advancing was the Union during this time. And that's mostly because it's boring. Economics is boring and confusing. And my dad, who studied finance all his life, wishes I will never step near that world. But during this time, his main paramount goal was preserving the Union, which he needed to do economically. So during this time, he was investing governmental money into factories who could, at the time, build munitions. In the future, they could build other things. He was investing money to factories that could easily turn out uniforms, but in peacetime they could turn out clothing. Instead of moving it all to the United Kingdom. Because during this time he was also very worried about... Stanton actually cut off a lot of the manufactured trade over there. He was very interested in railroads, which during wartime they can move men and war material. During peacetime, they can move men and economic material. He was willing to give away I don't want to say give away, he was willing to invest governmental funds into private ventures to protect the Union, but also doing so, he was protecting the financial future of America. And also, he was able to create very strong credit for the Union, because the Union during this time had to keep on borrowing money to keep the war going. But it was also done by Salmon P. Chase, who was able to keep on paying back that credit. In doing so, you could rely on America to pay back your loans. In doing so, you might be more willing to invest in America the next time at a lower interest rate, and America would take those lower interest rates and loans and then put more money into the economy. When the army was modernizing with all these new toys, they needed infrastructure of transportation and also production to keep up that. So, by doing so, he was modernizing that economy. I can tell you out west, we had railroads in Missouri that were expanded to move troops, and those later on would become pretty useful in towns. Nowadays, they're not as used as the Rust Belt has formed, but at the time, he was desperately trying to keep the Union together, and by doing that, he was strengthening the economy. You can also see just by how proto-stock market was going up and down at the time, he needed those victories to fund the defeats. Every victory he had was a boost in the idea of the Union, and this kind of became self-sustaining. During this time, there was the invention of the national currency, greenbacks, which the idea of a national currency was being used in Europe, but in America, that was unheard of. It was the state's role to do that. Using the war, I don't want to make it sound like he was using this war to push through all of this other stuff. His first idea was definitely save the Union over all else. But in order to save the Union, he adopted national currency. He adopted national financing. He adopted national taxes over traditional modes of funding. He was able to bring a lot of the modern states of economy, which would not be acceptable during times of peace, to the Union. He was modernizing the economy during the war to save the Union, which would later be going on. We should probably thank him a lot for. Thank a lot of Salmon P. Chase, even if they very much did not get along. Well, guys, I just want to thank you all for joining me on this 3 hours and 15-minute long stream. It has been an honor talking to all of you. Hi, Ryan. I'm sorry you have caught me in the final minute. I hope to do this again sometime. I'm not entirely sure when, but thank you all for joining. It has been great to talk to you guys. It has been a great year doing these videos, talking about it week by week. And if the war goes on for another year, I hope to be there. Thank you all, and I shall now end as I normally do.